Continue.
Mr. TOURAY, isa damu rano nga lo damendo jana mira fonyon ni wala.
Good afternoon, Mr. Chairman and my learned friend and members of the Commission.
Altinyang, Mr. Chairman, nkafunyo do kunyo, aning Commission la almul men baby jang albe Altinyang.
I hope you had a very good lunch.
Yes, it was a very nice local dish.
Domori dima bale menketan na jamfan tabiroti.
I hope you enjoyed it.
I enjoyed it indeed. Thank you.
That's good. So at least you have some energy for the last session.
Much obliged.
During the previous session, you gave us some more examples of widespread executive interference into the judicial process.
Misal Jamal dinna men yalongo wollel ka tamandulu ke dabulol men kenu na kitio fannal lanu meran ko ikabona na santo ngo mem ya jamena la bala multi.
During your postings at the Banjul Magistrates Court as well as Mansakonko and Farafenye.
Follow what we na yesamba do ko la Banjul Magistrates Court aning Farafenye Magistrates Court and Mansakonko Magistrates Court.
You also described how membership of the APRC could gain you massive favor with the executive.
Ya ho jam fana wala APRC la kanun delti ka kenna nyaade le pour ka katakol men fere pour ka demaro soto kiti bundal bulu.
Extending to immunity from civil and criminal prosecution, it seems.
Andunga bektara wo kono wala minti kol la men yalon ko dammani damma kiti bundal le manin tajire ya kisiol me yalon kitiol men yalon ko katara kerin je ke dabulol men ke je nyame.
And even absolve you from the legal responsibility of paying lawful debts.
Andung haning anarana ibonde ko nyi kono puruka
anu moli
julol men jota ikabalanga jola lua ko to lua e kangodi nyawnya ikabalanga ake.
Whilst on the other hand, if you were a perceived opposition of the Jame administration,
tumala men gar han kabi wonya kiro nyama ninga ya tere sobo keta ko itemu molti me yalon ko emu jamme marala molti.
That meant unlawful prosecution.
Membina la le daga wala nyindi ko abina kala be kitin le me yalon ko abekala luwanta ya kitin dirolde.
Persecution, harassment, intimidation.
De tobe la le kan andum malobe la le fanan kan.
As well as victimization. You've explained that due to your stance and your position as a magistrate to work according to the dictates of your conscience.
Andung kome ya foja nyame ko ite kiti tela menti ko luaya landi nyame ngandu ite fankala suji wale kan ko ibuka so moya dadu ila kudo ko nyin kono.
The law and justice.
Lua ni ntilimo.
You were actually earmarked by the executive.
Unata na sababu fo nyaton ko de benkata ya jamena la bala molti inata na nya iloy kan.
And you were just about to give us an example of how this came to play.
Andung ilafta kamisalo di molla nung nyinkeno ra nyaadi le nying ful narana ka damu ra nyaadi katama.
When you had a clash with the military in Farafenye, I believe it was at a military checkpoint.
Irina na se nyoro soro inin soja rol njikita ko aketa Farafenye checkpoint tol.
Kindly tell us how that unfolded.
Silang afonyamba wo senyolo nyinkeno keta nyaadi le inin soja rol temo.
It's okay. Thank you so much. I remember one day I was in Farafenye. The same Abasanya I spoke about earlier on. His elder brother was my personal friend. He had a mission. He came to Farafenye, but he was exhausted. He was tired. He wanted me to drop him at the Bambatenda terminal. He pleaded with me to give him a lift, just to drop him at the riverside. So I was obliged. We moved. When we reached the army camp, the road was clear. There was no vehicle in the checkpoint. So I drove straight in and I found a military officer standing on the highway. He said, I needed his permission for him to give me signal to enter the checkpoint. He asked me to go back on the rear. I said I wasn't going to do it.
Ako ntes nyantate batulale purate ntes signal puru ntenga dung wo dinkirato kasilota prunkata ako woto ngamuru koma and for nyanta lola damen janimbe dunnaite lawma wo ma fangola bari mfanan konte okela.
He insisted vehemently. He brought down his rifle. I told him, look, this does not scare me. I'm not moving.
Abalanta hanfo ayala kido jindi kawmuta nka nyimbukande silandi ndum fanante murula koma.
So we had an altercation, verbal altercation there.
Between diamu nyo saba nyo tema jele.
But when he realized I wasn't going to move,
Bringana raja ko ndefana mbedamen mampare murula koma.
and after a lot of irresponsible talk,
Andu wa yataranga diamu jama ke nyo
I
tema
put on
jele.
the gear of my vehicle and I left him behind.
Manna moto jia dundi ngatu koma.
So I went, I dropped Abba, and I came back.
Ntatanga abajindi muruta nang.
But in the ensuing altercation, he asked who I was.
Bari diamo nyin kolombe diamo la tumumen ay nyinin ka ntemu jumaleti.
I told him I am the traveling magistrate, but I said that's not important here.
Nka ya ntele mukiti telate menka tanin na bari wo man kumma ya jang.
And he started shouting at the peak of his voice, are you king? Are you this? Are you that?
Tumo lang ayadamu to ka wuri santo foitelo mansati foitelo nyinti foitelo wotibang foitelo munti.
So like I said, I proceeded to Bambatenda, I dropped Abba, and then I came back.
Tumo lang nganya kasiala ntenda bamba tenda ntatanga abajindi muruta nang.
And at this point, were you also in your official vehicle?
Fuhan kabi wo silo nyinkang ibela motole le kono do gila do ku bunda ya moto men dila ibe o motole kono ba.
Yes, that was the official vehicle for the magistrate. And I must also say this, all along the South Bank and the North Bank route, everybody identified that vehicle because it was in service for over a period of 5 years or more.
Mbe wo moto le kono ye mendin na do kura moto men nyanta tarlambulu mbe wo le kono adum be nyum fola wo moto ba kan kumfulo be karafulo be wo moto lonne ya sute kat wo yatara moto nyi wuche men ke do ko lan tel buluja sanji lulo sile.
In fact, when he was misbehaving, one of his colleagues came from the main gate, approached him, tried to whisper to him that you are talking to the magistrate.
Katu birabe o manya siala je akafunyoma kilim fama botana mbunda bala anata wo lafita diamu la ka diamu ay dumala ka fayen ko ka diamu nyimmete nyino magistrate tijang.
But he was just an indisciplined character.
Bari molo meya lonko aketa moleti meya lonko amang horoma soto.
So in the evening, when his commander, the camp commander in Farafenye,
Bitumuraro ala commander memmarta campo la Farafenye je,
who was at the time Yankuba Drame, the current CDS,
meya lonko utumo ka fayna Yankuba Drame. Bari bitilo wole msojaro lubela nyaton kote CDS, Chief of Defense Staff.
he came to Nawek Farafenye station to meet his cousin brother Omar, who was my friend. I used to stay with Omar in Farafenye.
Anatan nawek la officer of Farafenye purukana asanao badin doji je ikafome Omar adu Omar wayatara umunte terletin na katara nyokan wati jama.
Omar is the full blood elder brother of Abba.
Abba womu Omar koto maleti yelola karola ngamira identa bani mfala.
So I complained to Yakuba how, in fact, this officer misbehaved.
Kutotumolo ngakala miro fo Yankuba nyin sojaro ay manya menke wolunte nte kang siloka.
He was sorry about it. He apologized personally. So we spoke over it, and that was the end.
Ndi amuta aketaye afango ye kuyanye koti barbitung ayembolo sai ngakodi amufonga abanje frank.
So when I went back to Kombo, I narrated the incident to my dad. He was offended. He said I should write a petition.
Birin Satan and Kombo, Ndia Mutam Famae. Akataye kuyanye kote, akonyanta kalamiro safela le ukokama.
Then I wrote a letter, a formal letter of complaint to the commandant of the camp in Farafenye.
Wotumolem ngawasi dani kalamir letoro safe kaki kuntonko mem commandati membe farafenya kampo wotumo.
I copied the Secretary General, copied the Army Commander then Babkar Jata, copied the Master of the High Court.
Nga letoro nyin yelemang nga doki Attorney General nga doki sojaro la kuntonko nga doki dinkira luto dal damen yalonko kita dinkira kumalti letoro nyanta tala damen luto.
Few days later, I was in Mansakonko. The post office messenger came and delivered a letter in my hand.
Til danta obe kola mbe Mansakonko, bari dokula membe post office ka letter lu pose daming, anata ay letter natinya ayadum blokono.
This was a reply to my letter that I addressed to the Army Commander in Farafenni. But this time round, it was the Army Commander who was writing to me, Babkar Jata, with a very rude and sulky letter. I'm sorry to say. Very rude and sulky letter.
Between ni letter le kata jabiroti ntenga letter men safenu sojar nyaton ko e Farafenni bari nak men na tante jabi wala sojarul bela nyaton ko te utumo ka fay Babkar Jata bara la letter kata letter ti men ya lonko kuma furim balu men ya lonko horomanta ya kumolu ayol le safe wol letter odo
indicating in the said letter that they've not been able to control me, but this time around they'd get me.
And that foko itelumante malankuno bari nyin silo ibe bulo la lankane.
Okay, when I received the letter, I read it 3 times.
Bringa letter nyin soto nga karansi nya saba.
I was so annoyed about it.
Akoyen kamfa bake.
Then I received a call
Tumo fananata kumandiro soto
on the land phone.
Telefono ti me yalon kolem office kono telefono ti land phone.
Mr. Touré, before we go to the call, from the contents of the letter and how you felt about it, did you feel threatened in any way?
No, I was not threatened. As a matter of fact, I was willing to engage Babkar.
But was it a threat?
It was a threat, but I was willing to engage him. I wanted to send him a stinker.
Ate kuma kamulu menu safia munta silandir kumollem. Bari wo mante silandia mambo noto nda fa lafta jabila num fa nganyon kuma kon kolengulu kiyaye.
So I then received a call.
Otumo monata nkumandi.
Again, another big coincidence. It was his assistant who was Sheriff Samsudin Sar.
Yo, andung anatake kuti menketa bengoti. Andu otatake ate nolang koleti, ikafome nutumo Sheriff Samsudin Sar.
Sheriff Samsudin had been trying to reach me on the phone for over a week.
Sheriff Samsudin ba katakanum pur kante soto telefono to, men tatan fa siata lokumuti.
On a private matter.
E kula karola me yalonko omu karala koleti.
I've never met him in life.
So
he would call all the stations where I used to travel because we sit in Mansakonko, Farafenni, Kerawan, and SL. And then when I come down to the combos, so he would keep calling all around various stations where I work and my home address in Serekunda.
I commandiro kedinkira jamale to montela ko do ko Benjamin nka tamale kata kito lo kedulalto Mansakonko Farafenni Kerewan ndaka kito kedamenu beto ayulu be kumandi kata hanfo na suo fongo kono ala commandiro tata baro nyonya nding amansoto no fowulum.
So when I received this call, he introduced himself, we greeted, and then we spoke about the issue he wanted to discuss with me.
So bringa la kumandiro soto nganyo konto nganyo hadamaya hanfo ngambandi bitu tumole na takacha te bande kumandi kan komenna bitu ngawobe kacha utumole.
Then I said to him, but look, I said, I just received a letter from your army headquarters and it's your commander, Babkar Jata, who's writing to me. The letter is rude and sulky.
Utumole ngata fai bringa diamo banka bari nga letter ole soto mbulu jande membota alla sojaru goya kuntonko ya. Bari letero nyin kuma furing kuma horomantam balle be kal letero nyin kono.
I said to him, I didn't write to Babkar, I only copied him.
Nka ente mam Babkar fang safe. Ndanga men safe nga ki meye nga ayele male drom pour ka ki ate fana ye pra fanansi bo akalama.
Then he said, oh, is it you? I said, yes. Oh, you are the magistrate who was the subject of that letter. I said, yes. He said, please, I beg you for God's sake, don't reply to that letter.
Akonye yo muna mitelo magistrate otinkai ha. Akonye bitu letero amunta ya ulitele kamankai ha. Akonye ngedani alaye kana letero jabi.
He then quickly added, he said, I beg you, do it for my own sake, not for your own sake anymore. Please don't write reply to that letter.
Aseta kotaka akonye mbedani la alaye. Akentela ko kama kana ite fanga la ko jube bari ntela ko jube kana o letter o jabi.
He said there is a big conspiracy behind that letter. If you would reply to that letter, you may even lose your very life.
Akonye jamfa jaubale be sitiring wo letter o la ko kama. Adunia jabi ya ko tentendi asekeno if sibono ini o fangoto.
Said this matter was discussed in State House.
Akokatu ikatiata nyinkola State House fangoleto.
And orders have been given by the president.
Adum president o kango di tolulale wotumo.
Said when Babakar came from State House, he called my assistant, that was the third in command, a Mr. Baji. I cannot remember his first name now, but it's a Mr. Baji. He said Babakar called my assistant, who was third in command in the army.
Ako biri bota State House. Babukar ye mo kumandi me yalon sojaro la nyaton kaya silo. Wole mo sabanja utime mo sojaro lube kunton koti. Kadu ni botate Babukar ya atelo mo foloti fulanja mo Mr. Sarleti. Sabanja ko Mr. Baji lo mo takanyi na to tolale. Andum Mr. Jata yo fon kumandile kadiamwae.
So when Babakar was talking to Baji in his office, he said, you know, in the army headquarters, if you know the building, he said the upstairs apartment, it doesn't have a ceiling. So when you are talking in one office and you are in another office, you can hear directly all what is being said.
Ako Babakar bedia mukawo Mr. Baji ya tumomeng. Niye sojar korda nying Kenya lonje. Silinte bunyina. Nibe dia mukang office do kono. Membe siring office do kono. Wakela kumakang lubemo ile wole asabu Babukar be dia mukang nying ala assistant yetu momenna mo ala assistant nolanko yetu momenna ateyo kumakang lumoy wotu mole.
He said when I had the conversation, I wasn't happy because I knew what they were up to was nasty, but I couldn't intervene. I just kept quiet.
Ako biringal la moy la kumol la hanfu ngambandi aketanyi ni kuyabati amandi anya ferenkatu ngalonko ibe ferole sitika memu fereja upati. Bari wairi mandabula je kuma mamfonye wala namfanangande bara mandia nyefreng.
He said the issue is beyond Babakar himself. Please, I'm begging you, don't reply to that letter.
Akonye ngotu mole konyin atambita Babakar fango kumolale. Wotombe dani la kana ole tro jabi.
But I wasn't bothered about that.
Bari wa mante de ngamansila.
When we did our round, I came home.
I
went to the High Court.
Ntata High Court.
I had cause to meet the master, Usman Jammeh. I said, Master, did you read Babakar's letter? He said, yes. In fact, that's a matter I want to discuss with you. He said, as a matter of fact, just 2 days ago, I met Babakar at the petrol station. He said it was just a coincidence. We both entered the station. We wanted to fill our vehicles. He said, soon as he saw me, he alighted his vehicle. He came down to my vehicle, telling me, this is your magistrate. It's been a problem for us now, but we will get him. Biringa te lota drong ayenteje ajitala motoko na atantela mototo akavo nyanko alanyi magistrate kari mole me ya lonko akita mo koleng tibari mbulobe la kanne. So Usman said, please don't reply to the letter because if you do, it's dangerous. Usman konyan dukare kanela letter jabi niyake asikeno ku kolengoti. So he felt threatened that it was time that I should be transferred from Masakongo. Ate konye ya de unne hanfo because he knew that I will definitely have problems with the soldiers in Farafenye on the ground. That why ni lonko soja rolumen be Farafenye ni te kar la nyoma fonni yeku soto me yalonka asike wali oti ni olutema. So when I came home, I discussed the matter with my dad. He told me, when you narrated your episode, I knew somebody was behind it all. It was not just a mere coincidence. Birin saita su ngakonyin Kenya be kachampa mae. Akonya ngalon amanke kukensia otide amanke kuti fananka foko kole meneng akolu benda ngalon ko mole be akonyin koma. So that was the issue. I didn't want to pursue the issue any further because it coincided with my transfer, and that was the end of the Masakonko episode.
Wolem konyindi yo manna bula kono makoteke katu yente saundi wole nyama yembondi mansa konko bitun konyim fananata dede la wole nyama.
And Mr. TOURAY, you've already alluded to the fact that you accept that you are a strong-headed individual.
Mr. TOURAY sondalo ko ite mo multimia e kungo jata bakale bokasong.
Or perhaps someone would say stubborn.
I'm not strong-headed, neither am I stubborn. I just feel I should not be intimidated in any given situation.
Amanke kunjati, andunga manke kanja fananti. Bari ntenga nyene mutako, mu manya nante silandila ku kense mokango nyaduru.
But in fact, your recalcitrance and your defiance to the dispensation at the time attracted the attention of the big man himself, as they otherwise known as Oga.
Komi ila manyani ika balanyami wayati na la fola bonga fon mimi alonko wale mata masakundala na teka moti mi alonko ay abotela ku kalama.
Ikafai Oga.
Yes, he made a statement about me a couple of times.
Si nyafula akadiamu andunga kakuma fo ntela kuoma.
I remember the Abasanyang incident that I took to the court.
Nakilo bakang Abasanyang kuome ya lonko ngasamba kiti dula.
The elders of Buyam and Kankuntu went to meet him after the elections.
Buyam nin Kankuntu alifalu ikafuta nyoma le tata kambring karte fayo botala.
And I saw that program over the television.
Na programo je television oleto.
Part of this discussion was to reconcile with the Buyam community for the unlawful arrest and incarceration of Abba.
Programo la fanna do bije wole mnyintiko isakata ye muru nyokan ye badi ya choki ka foko Abasanya na muto aketa kuleti dromme ya lonko aketa le barbitun isi muru nyoka ye akuo landi ye badi ya julo luchoki.
On that occasion, he made a statement. He said what annoyed him most was the fact that when Abba was arrested and detained, he did not opt for any other lawyer, but one who does not only hate his government, but does not like him in person as a human being.
Ako me yate dimen kuokono, biringo kuoketa, ye lawyer men bula akonyi noma, wala memba kitonyi ntamandikang, atatake moleti me yalonko. Amari amanda njina ko amalla finna man sakundala. Bari mole munyinti wo me yalonko ayente fango kumole kong. Ayena man sakunda kong bari konante ya fango asembo abentele nokang.
So Jammeh himself perceived you as a personal threat, as an enemy.
He said it many times. But I wasn't bothered about it, quite frankly. I remember when we had the Pasala Jan case. I traveled to the provinces with my mother-in-law, my wife's mother. The British High Commission was concerned about my personal safety because they made inquiries and all the answers were leading to the conclusion that they didn't, all the people they contacted to inform them that they didn't know my whereabouts. So they were concerned about my personal safety.
Bitungo British High Commission membijang na koya de umbake atena donyolu katu na otamo biri manje mankalangolong akokete de umbate ando anyinin karolu kedamen nubeto mo dinkiraman soto mensi kuma koyo fae bitundela yemango wonya aketa kole abati.
Sorry, it was the Shayoji affair of the European Union. Alexandro Mariani, who was asking about my whereabouts.
Okay, among British High Commission, Alexandro Mariani, wole ba ko no masata kanun, wole European Union, wole Europe banko la den na kafuba, membe siring wo kafo toya la Gambia jang, wole ba ko no makanu, wole ben na kunyinin ka kanu.
So when I came from the provinces, it was D.A. Jao who got me on the phone.
Rimbota na mbolongo kono wasilo nseitanang, kafome D.A. Jao, wole kumandi telefonoto.
And that's the former Minister of Information.
Anene keta minister ti jang mem marta kibaro lula.
And he said the European Union charge d'affaires has been asking about you and wanted to see you. He said, I will call him to tell him that you are around, you are in town.
Akonye ngotumole ko membe sirin jang abe maraling Europe tundo la kulu la be karafan kulu be karafan ngatela ma follow nyin tembe. Amari be nyinin ka kanne nunga be nyinin kan yo bar bitun silan wairi e ngeje mbe akumandila le ngafa en ko ina tale kadwa kalafta diamule yenne mba fala ina tale bijang.
So I went to meet him in the office. Then the office was in Banjul.
Utumole mwulita ntata bayindi katala office oto
When I
utumo
met
ila
him-
office obe Banjul.
When I met him, he asked me
Birina nyoja nyinin ka
if I had wanted to relocate to any of the countries in the West.
akonye fo ibela finale kata si banku kan akata banku o bankuti menketa tubabu banko law tiliji mafangoti.
He expressed concern about my security.
Ayala daunda itandi ntefang kumola tanko kama.
He said, we don't have consular services here, but be rest assured, wherever you want to go in the Western Hemisphere, I will talk to the embassies and they will give you a visa.
Akonye ntelajang mambunda sotome yalon ko wolle ka odoku fasong lutamandi tamala la kolu consular services. Akonye mbari ijuso tenkundi hakilo tenkundi ite lafta tala dawo banko lukang ndebe diamula wala ambassador yenne kajeko kome nyanta topoto la ite ya be topoto fo ila tasi sono ya.
I told him I was not leaving the Gambia under any circumstance.
Kaya mampare Gambia bulala ntita dawo ko kunding ba koma mbetula janne.
And Mr. Turu, you said time and time again that you were not intimidated. You
No,
were not
certainly I
scared.
was not.
Ya for wati jama ko iman silang ferem.
But it was clear that your personal security and safety was under risk.
Bari yalo na
Yes, that's
ko
quite
kumi
true.
fongola tanko Kenya fene miya ko deul na kulem.
Because
Yeah,
whilst in Mansakonko,
Katumbe mansa kongo tu momeng
one day in the afternoon around 3:30,
libulo talan sabanin talama fangola
the officer commanding the NIA
memmo
came in a rush to
Me-
my residence.
memmarata NIA wala tundo kanga nyakandito na tan na kordato na bungoto.
He said he had intelligence from the Director General in Banjul that the July 22nd boys in Soma were preparing to come and attack me in Mansakonko.
Ay nyim fanyanko yekullo kibaro soto kaboyla korda bato Banjul ko July 22nd la molu men ya lonko ibe wotundo kan soma je ana dalo lulaibe parekan ne purkana boyinte kan.
Please give us the names of the NI officer in Mansakonko under DG at headquarters.
Wo ena nyi mimbe mansa konka to
Think,
dinanila kuntonko nyingto.
I wouldn't be able to remember his name. He's a fuller man, but I think he's Mr. Jallo. He was the director of the NIA in Mansakonko at the time. Sorry, the officer commanding the NIA in Mansakonko at the time.
Aseke ngafili atona kontonga mabari ngamira
I think he
Mr.
was
Jallo
Mr.
lem
Jallo.
ngamira Mr. Jallo lem wotembo atele marta NIA eulula atele mwila nyaton koti mansa konko tundo kan wotumo.
Who was the DG at headquarters?
Jumali la kuntonko ti ila makama bato.
This was in 1995, 96. I wouldn't be able to remember.
Nyimu 1995 kata 1996 sangole kono dal hakilo mamari muta memwila kuntonkoti Director General NIA ila suba kono.
So he said he was assigned to come and provide security for me. I told him I don't want any government security.
Ako ya tebula nyine la pro ayena pro kante kanta fonsi tanka nkaye mallafi mansa kundala kantari wo kantari la pro kantanka.
He said, but if anything happens to me, he was going to be held responsible. I said, even if I'm going to die, I'll use my blood to vindicate your name. I'll write that it was my decision that I didn't want security.
Ako nyambari nin kukitetela wairi yentele bula ite kantola ha ni kukitetela woto nte adunobe lala ntele kande nkaye hanni mfata yelo mbewle tala ngasafero kala kaitandiko ye ite mamfewo fenke nte fango la manya mfango la kango wole nsindi jam hanifo kuketana mbete senendilale.
I said to him, let me send you back to the same July 22nd boys in Soma. Tell them if they are prepared to come, they must equally be ready for burial from 5 p.m. to Isai prayer time. I said, if only they decide to come, let them be rest assured that there will be burial in this place from 5 p.m. to Isai prayer time. So when I told him that inside my parlor, he looked at me, he was stunned, he couldn't say anything. I said, just go and convey that message.
Mbe siri na salo le kono utumo ba biringa yin kuma kan lufa en kayen ko mfanam beta fanan kila o July 22nd molu kan afoye ni pareta wairi ko ka parele kana boyinte kan afoye ni pareta inata hanu foye mambo in kandiro bay woto be bade o kelale kabo talal lulu alansara wato hanu fo safo sali wato abebe kala bade olete nsi fanan yo ko indi tolo man fanan beta kila yo kibaro fo itoli.
So, Mr. Touré, you're not only a warrior in the courtroom, but also at the battlefield.
I mean, I know
Mr.
as a matter of history that war is all about propaganda. So that was my own propaganda to them.
Nda ya lon tariko ni tariko lon ya jube. Kelolu be propaganda wale mkuma ba fo ka ferolu fo menu ya lon ko itesi tukuno menu la isi sujuno menu la. Abebe dendi ngole bala.
That was the end of that episode.
Wo kuwa banda wale to.
Let's go to your next destination, your next postings. Where was that?
I came to Bundung, but Bundung was absolutely quiet. This was after all the elections. And there was no trouble around the country.
And so it was only during the elections that trouble brewed.
No, that's when they reached their height.
And that would be as a result of political.
Yes. But the life of magistrates in those days, you were permanently confronted with one challenge or the other. So I left Bundung, I went for my bar, I came, I was posted in Basse. Okay, when it was when I was posted in Basse, the people in Basse, the July 22nd, got to know that I was the one who was supposed to go there.
July 22nd la omulu menu beje ina talon ko wotumole ko yara yentele nati je fanan yentele sambanam Basse kitibunda laje.
When were you posted to Basse?
What did you mala ye sound in Basse?
This must have been in 1999, 2000, because I spent 14 months in Basse.
Namera kabo 1999 kata 2000 karunga kartan nani leke Basse sanji killing karfula.
So Banta Kamara made the delegation, they came and met the Chief Justice and said they didn't want me in Basse.
Banta Kamara ay molu kafunyoma ye molu wulindi kana Chief Justice kang kafayen ko Mansula ntela Basse man lafin naje.
Who was Banta Kamara?
Banta was the chairperson of AFPRC in Basse, and he was a member of the July 22nd. But he was a highly influential person.
Banta le July 22nd kafola siran TOTJ wotundo kang adu mole fana mu me yalonko atobota bake ala ko sembo warta ma famala molu kono.
I think at some point he even became vice president of APRC.
Andu ngamira wati soto ndafang ye palaso di ala me yalonko wole APRC patio nyina president nolanka makamoti vice president.
So they met the Chief Justice and told him, but the Chief Justice told them that, look, we don't have any other magistrate we can post in Basse for now, except Mr. Touré.
Rio for Chief Justice ye. Afana ye jabi nyine la ko ngongo. Nyin tembe magistrate do sotombe men sambala Basse Mr. Touré kola.
At that time, there were a lot of problems in Basse.
Andu wotembo kukole njamal lebe Basse.
Pertaining to the image and integrity of the court itself.
Men tilinta kiti bunda fango lanya ning a Kenya la kulu belari nje nyame.
And Usman insisted that it was me and me alone who could go and stabilize the place.
Usman fanambalanta akontelomu ntedda manne fanamu moti men sitano je ka kata kakulu tembendi je kelaku.
And why do you think the APRC party were resistant to you coming there?
Manat nete fe APRC la party o moli be balanko ita manyana tala Basse.
Because Banta had this very unfortunate privilege of controlling every magistrate who was posted in Basse, but he knew he couldn't do same with me.
Katu banta otumo. Nyinketa koma sayoti magistrate men be kata Basse. Ikatara bulole kono. Atele kango tamandi ulubekang. Bari ate banta na talon kontede. Nde mumoleti me ya lonko ayodolu maranyame ate kuno lantema.
I've never met him in life before, but from what he has been hearing from people and so on and so forth, in fact, I understand when they came, they asked him in the Chief Justice's office, the CJ asked them, why didn't you want him to be posted in Basse? He said, we understand this man, nobody can manage him.
Katu wato men itel tatantela okodia mo fangola Chief Justice ya. Atebe atemumoleti nte fangona ate kungo nena manyoje wotumo, nena mambem follow. Bari la kumodante Chief Justice ye. Aya nyilinka ko enko sang atelu mule mualla balanda ati muna nali mallafi nyim magistrate la pra itara Basse ya jabi men na wole mnyinti ko nga nyin kibaro moyle mole mnyinti me ya lonko mo buka malankunno ndunta malankunno la o dalilo le ya sabu mallafa laji.
So he was under the wrong notion that magistrates were supposed to be managed or controlled.
Ma sa mo ba mutulanga bul wala nyinte ko kiti tela ni bije nyanta katara marola koto.
Well, that was a well-established tradition. It's most unfortunate that if you go to Farafenye, Sambojang had control. If you go to Basse, Banta had control. So there were these power barons all across the country. And every civil servant, for that matter, if you go, you must go pay homage to them. So he realized I wasn't going to be the one to be controlled.
Wotembo kube kerimbanko kang, ni Farafenye mafangolom. Sambujan jany le ebetar la wole la marokoto nim baselom ebetar la banta kamara la marole koto andungo tembo amanda itella banko fanna jama bije molu bije men keta mo sembe malti moto boringulu inio sembolu be siring itele nyino motako ko kundi nafuta tetella tundo la itella kamole nyanda tamala andung utumo base banta nala mole ya lonkonte dum itewole soto no lantela itente malankunnola hanfo e fanglu yalon walanna itata Chief Justice ya ko man lafin laji.
So finally I went to Basse.
Bitun nata Basse wo kamale kang.
So we were there doing the work.
Bijembe do ko ke kang
Until when one day
folunkiling
my wife called me on the phone and told me that
namuso yankumandi telefono to ay nyim fonye ko
that UDP delegation came there on a campaign.
UDP la kafomolu nata campaign wala je
And somebody was killed.
andu mo sotonta ye memfa je
And she's been hearing that they will take the matter to court.
andu abe nyim moy kanko iba ko kito sambala kiti bundalela.
So she told me to be careful.
Akonye bitu isi hakilotu.
Told her I'll do what is right,
Nka mentilinta mbe wole kela.
no matter the consequence.
Aketa kuokundinti tonya mbeta amala wolela.
So I went to Basse.
Ntata Basse.
And 25 people, including the United Democratic Party, were arraigned before me.
Mumuani lulu, wolukono UDP la molu, inata wole londi nyati limula.
24 members of the UDP and the United Democratic Party was also charged.
Mumuani nani ya wole kalame ke tumi, andu inata UDP party fango fanan charge.
The party itself, as an institution, was charged with a criminal offense.
Was the 25th accused person, United Democratic Party.
Ya mumuang anin nani le kilin tumi, imanda wotode. Party fango mu mewo, UDP party fango mu mewo, wole keta muani lulunjangoti ye tumiro la menka.
Can you give us the criminal analysis or the analysis of that under criminal law?
Isa fonye bang isa fonye no wokol isa temeno ya fonye komenina ta kuja barala la kuoto luala fanala.
As to whether or not a company or an organization can be charged with a criminal offense.
For kasene andi for doku dinkra bunda wala patio isa tumino le ko ay fenne ke mi an kuja balem luala fanala.
Yes, in law you can charge a corporate personality.
Luala Carola. Isi bunda ba molu isi tuminole.
When I say corporate personality, means a company or a registered entity, you can charge them with a criminal offense.
ninko company wolem doku bunda ba wala me yalonko aketa kafuleti men safeta isi tumino le o kufosomon.
Would you in that process have to lift the veil of incorporation?
Fo kan inyanta ka fengo bonni mi yalonko wala ye mura inyanta ko bondile saje se maril nyun tumino banke samba kiti bongoto wala ka tumiri jawla kan ko ku jaw balek.
No, you can charge them directly without, in fact, lifting the veil of incorporation. The lifting of the veil of incorporation takes place under civil procedure.
Wo isi tumino le lua la silo la satara ima ilawo muraram fano boykang. Wo muraram fano kau boykang wo kana wati la ning ayatra kota ta futa hanfo silang aketa langkelema koti meya lonko nyin silang kunyanta tamala jele. Utumo lo isila wo muraram fano bondi.
In that case, you would only be able to fine the company. You would not be able to impose a custodial sentence.
Yes,
I'm doko wodoku bundanyi seminkeno isafo ene ko nyanta ko dole jola bara komita fulano ko besila dulakri wala yeso wotakela no kasoto te solona no kasoto.
Yes, you are perfectly right. But you see, when you charge a corporate personality, you can only do so in relation to corporate matters. For instance, where there is negligence on the part of a body corporate and it has resulted to damage, or where, for instance, fraud has been perpetrated by a corporate body. But a matter pertaining to individual liability, such as murder, I mean, that's not within the corporate responsibility of a company or a registered body. That was just the highest degree of manifestation of vendetta against the UDP as a political entity.
Mbetembo mento utumo ni be misali kama bunda ba kitindila ibe kitindila nyina kan ni misali kama tinyari keta wala kasara keta wala ku keta amunda kitindi bunda nying ibe duno lala wolle kan andu iduno me ba lale kan kuluro to wolem ibe kolole jola wala ye alaman yo bari bitum italiye ko wulindi nyaming buruka patio fango kumo samani weme yitandi wolem nyinti ko itelu laf ibe kamfarin patio nyin kamale ila fitajulu jo kolengo lala patio kan wala na patio fango samani.
Was the leader of the UDP party also charged?
For patio nyin kuntonko nyin UDP la patio kuntonko fo ya fana 2 million.
Sadaba was accused number 1.
Mr. Dabole mo floti tumiro la tamenka.
So it was one Sergeant TOURAY who mentioned the matter before the court.
Ka fo meye Sergeant TOURAY wole nyin ko lumemba kitila wole akumo fo kitibunda nyina.
He came and made a submission, very brief, that they have started investigations and the investigations are not concluded.
Anata idea musutu nekije ko yela kisikisiro lu damu tale ko nyin kono andu law kisikisiro lu mambam folo.
So he also raised the issue that bail murder is not bailable by the magistrate courts.
Ay nyim fanam fojele ko pour ka o molu bail magistrate kitibunda te o lu bail nola.
At that point, Mr. TOURAY, did you have jurisdiction to actually entertain a murder case?
Mr. TOURAY, fo wato nyin kono. Wato mina ye wokiti onyi nati nyati wodiamo nati nyati fo wato yesembo sotole no prise lamo no kiti onyi tanya la bon fe ebe kiti bunda min fo yesembo sotole pluko we lamo wokiti la bon.
No, I could not hear the substance of the charge murder before me, but the Criminal Procedure Code had been amended, and if I can remember, I believe it must be around section 285A, wherein power has been conferred on magistrates when a charge is brought before you, i.e. a capital offense, which you cannot prosecute or which you can hear and determine, and the matter is under investigation. Power has been conferred on you to remand the accused persons in custody pending the completion of the investigation.
Otumo falimo ketale luala tukundo to o kufa songolo to ndebe tembo mendo otumo tumiro nyi memfam fota nte o kisikisinola bari bitunyi sembo ila o falimo me yake onya we sembo dinale pour akonyi menu misali kama meni alon ko wolle keta moluti menu ba ko kono misali kama ko mo fa men keta onya wo molu nseri man no le ke sambari man hanfo jannin ko nyimbe bola nyoto wairi wotembo iko abe kisikisiro bundale to.
Was it preferred by the prosecution or the government at that time to actually make use of that provision to get especially politically motivated detainees remanded in mile 2 rather than perhaps to go straight to the High Court where bail could be applied for and given?
Fo ikaga min kamba min kitindir la ni wollem police odi fo akabo mansala bulo kono president wala karola pre isaje ko mol mi yalon ko ini mansa dunta nyola political la fanal isaje se keno moti mi iso luanyin ta ya landi kan isaje se sindino dulakilim fo wato mi yalon ko isa ibela case nyin saundi la kasamba kiti bato.
Government's drive simply was to secure a remand order against the accused persons. That was their
Mansa kunda hammo mu membe tinu ngotumo puruka nyimolu mutake sambari man kasola wala muite langani yoti nun.
Because at the relevant time there was filed a bail application before the High Court by Mrs. Denton.
Katu wotembo abekela tumo men wayatara Mrs. Denton ay bail kaito dundile foka pare kitibunda bato.
I was then not even aware of that.
Utumo ndema hani bo kala mafang.
So they were competing to get an order remanding the accused persons before any possible granting of bail by the High Court.
Benyosa nyoba sabangole la nungotumo puru isinyimolu sambano riman nyadi janning wo bail kaito la kango be dunna hanfo janni be londila puru satara itele nyilu dundiri man itel bole nyosa bangola nungotumo.
Because it was also a settled practice of the government at that time that when people are charged with capital offense, they will rush them to a magistrate court, get an order of remand, and even after the High Court would have granted bail, they would still insist, they would still refuse to release them, and they will be justifying the detention on the basis of the order of remand made by the trial magistrate, when in fact the High Court has already granted bail. We had incidents of that nature in the past.
Wotumo kuolu menu kake ninku keta drong men keta o kusangara ni mfasongoluti itelikaka nyosa bangoleti puruka kutama ndi mensi ke dalilo ti puruka nyimolu mutake sorong riman katu ikatara muna nyosa bankang janim bel kaito bedadala kabo kitibunda bala puruka foko kanyim molu bel itelikaka katale hanufo itelio molu dundiriman nin kaito hanin kaito natabo kitibunda bala puruka nyim molu bel ikalo mune kang ha wayatarle wotambitale wotarnitale wayatarle nyimmolu lako ye dundiriman foka pare andum ila haningani yo kakawleti pour ka molu mutakasola.
To give the issue of bail some context here, because we discussed the issue of the decree number 1 suspending the constitution. This was after the transition had actually finished and the constitution was back in its rightful position.
Yes, this was in 2000.
Yeah, so therefore there was a right to bail.
2001, yes, I believe, 2001.
There was a right to bail. And
there was a right to bail.
Even in murder cases, unlike what operates today.
Yes, there was a right to bail in murder cases.
Otumo 2001, nyanto bijele, hani mofa kito, isa mari bail nole.
So the whole idea was, because the investigations are not concluded, and I cannot grant bail, it's a subordinate court, I don't have power to grant bail, they thought the only option available to me was to remand them, and I refuse.
Wotembo, wairi kitibunda la ko amamfuta auto follow, itella hamo moment nyindro, yenyine lom, yenyine mutakonte, sembe dote na katu, ntebe kitibunda mena omu kitibunda ndimulti. Sembe doti je, animfere doti je, fonga nyimolu samba riman. Itelebela firengolela, wolana ye kolu tamandi wonya tarinke, puru nyimolu sitari man, did
you have a discretion to do so despite the law that provided that you should remand them?
Yes, I am convinced I have a discretion because if you look at the law across the Commonwealth, especially in Kenya, you can meet a judge in his house over the weekend and move your bail application.
Ha ngamere otembo nsi okenole katunia jube Commonwealth banko lukang sako banko membe ke Kenya membe ko Kenya isita kitindirla kanne ala bungo fango kono hani wato memmanke doku wato defense ka fo lokum bandula teng weekeno ina ya kacha andu isi kaito dundino me yalon ko mu bel kaito leti.
But looking at the statutory provision itself, did that give you room to exercise that discretion?
But
In
say
fact,
ne
that's
loi nyin jibe loi min lota fo e wo sembo dila bam priya wo ke bam.
That statutory provision was provided only for situations, and the power was to be exercised only in good faith, not in bad faith.
Sarto membelari waka wole mnyindi ko nimbata mandila abe tamala ngania senu ngania kendo le kang bari mota tamandila nyinkanko kuruya ibole tamandila je wala ngania jawya ite okela je.
It was not a witch hunting. It was not a provision intended for the state to victimize anybody, but it was meant to be exercised. That power was meant to be exercised in good faith.
Kulo me alonko amanke ko ya wulinyine kama kudo bari bitung wotembo wole mnyinti ko mo manja nabula la mo noma kala bon fenyo noma purka nambara bari bitung hanni ba sarto fanan tamandila nyanta kala kusenu ngole kang anengani ya senaya.
But again, under the law,
bari kota ke loi koto
when a matter comes before me as a magistrate,
ninko na tante kan ko ntemu magistrate leti
and I don't have jurisdiction over it,
andung asembo tentela purka ko taman
I have a power to transfer it to the court having jurisdiction.
ngani sembo soto le ka saundi ka samba kiti bunda do la mene ya sembo soto.
And that was the power that I exercised.
Bito sembo mfanan tamata wolela
And I referred the matter to the Chief Justice in Chambers to sit over the issue of bail.
tumole ngako samba Chief Justice la office auto police ko tamandi mentilinta bail kola.
And I expressly ordered that the accused persons be escorted under the command of the officer commanding police, Basse Division.
Ando ngani kangole fanan dundi nyola je ko nyimolu ni be sambala mo si samba mensi kanta me yalon ka bekela alifala kangole ka memmu officer commanding Basse tundo la police bunda la karola.
And I also further ordered
Ando ngani fanan kangola je
that they be taken to Banjul police station,
koi si samba Banjul police station
be
oto
detained there overnight.
isilaje mutokono
I further ordered him
andung tententa kanyin kango fanandiala
to bring them before the Chief Justice in Chambers the following morning.
woso mosomanda isi nyimmolu samba Chief Justice nyati
And I further ordered
andung continue to fanan kanyim fo
on no account
andung akanake nyawnyandi nyama
should they be detained in Mile 2 prison
puruke samba mile tu kasola
or in
wokana
any other location other than Banjul police.
andu ikane samba dula wodula to na manke Banjul police
Because I knew
katu ngani lonko
that they would not have been tortured in Banjul police.
ni be Banjul police mote mutala ke bala jatulu
The
dimi
general public would have had access to them.
katu ibaje la ko bunda dolu menu mu bantala bundalti wolu si nyimmolu soton nole
At every time of the day or night.
tilo wato be suto wato be
So the following day I was sacked again.
bitu bringa ke woso molon ko take yembay do ko wala.
Mr. Toure, indeed, you were able to be very creative with the law as a magistrate, it seems, and you were able to use the gaps and the lacuna in the interest of victims and to secure justice rather than applying the law strictly in a technical sense.
Yes, because if you are right, if you look at the setting in Basse at that time,
Councilor nyine ngaka Mr. Toure wotembo ikata moti men nyamenta afereta akalango warata
I believe I was-
lawo sartolu men yelandi yesilo lu sotole be dunne kono nyamen kan ngoji kela kota mandi luanin tilum kan hanu foyte lafta e kenya men ayo silota bari sedo fana ya jabi nyina kai wotembo aha
if I had exercised the other option of remanding them,
ninga nyin kando ta purke sambari man
I would have been a charlatan in the society today.
amonta biitilo mbekela moto kuyari mbaleti jamakono
Because the setting in Basse,
kato tumo kolbe nu nyame mbase
the climate of fear and intimidation was too great.
kato tumo molla silanya aning kamolu detendi asembo wartan mbake base
And there was no opportunity how they could have gone to Janjambure
andun siladoti je mensa kendi hanfo yetano jajambure
without any one of them or all of them being tortured.
satara itelu kono hani mo kilinti je mamenta jire ya walla ka fo itelu mo besi tanka tajire yama wotakela num fereti je foy bulo elar kilinkan walla ye jire ya.
So that warranted your second dismissal.
Wala ya ti
Yes.
na te by fulanjang.
Yes.
And this time, did you escape? Did you
Nindo
come
foi
back?
Canada.
They-
Mutanen.
This time, did you have a chance to petition the president and come back to the judiciary.
Ni wati do fo nata silo soto pour que sefer ke kata president kan pour que muruna judiciary ba kiti dulato.
No, as a matter of fact, Justice Lati, who was the Chief Justice at the time,
Ni kol kata nyame wotumo Justice Lati wala Chief Justice Otembo
prevailed on me to write a petition.
Ayeni la lotan kan akonga petition o safe wala mkamfana na kala American lo safe.
And there was so much pressure on government also. They were going to yield, in my humble opinion.
And wotumo yaman sakunda fana detendide ye detendi bake hanufo atata findi ko e fanalu si sonno le kolula pour nte la ntaram fambulo kam.
But I was not interested in continuing on the bench.
Bare amanna kenna la fonna koti pour nga continue kiti tamando la wo bunda la bench nyinto.
I remember many of my friends and brothers called me to congratulate me, and one of them happened to be Baba Galejalo, whom I met this morning here. And when he called me on the phone, he told me, "Congratulations for your redemption."
Hakilo baka ntero lu nkafunyolu mo jamalu yen kumandino tumo kan konton kan jay fanan kolu lanya kam andugol kono mo kilimbije me yalon ko ka fayna babagal le jallo ala yake biñin sumanda fango na benta jang andum bringa yen kumandino ayen konton ne ayen jay akonye puru ila kolu lanya kam.
So your dismissal in essence was a blessing in disguise.
It was.
Kam to ko le bayo akete la kairolti.
It was indeed, because the government would have been compelled, because the magistrates also had an emergency meeting and they were going to take a position if I was not reinstated back, and they couldn't have contained the situation. But I just decided that the time is up, I have to be on my own.
Akata no nyame wotumo be ngoketa ko kamale dia molu keta kato dumo nyaton ko dol bije men yalon ko leftal num fango pour ye ben ya ko dia mu puru yente murundi bar bitun tele nata jube nko amansi o beto ndenga ko tujele dron ngam fonyo wole mun dela kairoti wodadi lole ya sabu nga ko tutulaje.
But the case of Mr. Dabo brought 3 changes in the law.
But Mr. Dabo la ko ay falin sabale nati loi la karola.
And that answers one of your areas of concern, legislations which have been passed to stifle the rights of the citizenry.
Wo ay lañinin karo fanna do jabile wala ñinti ko wo fanna kilimbi jeme yalon ko ka molu da soron menna wala ka molu da suki loi la karola pour ñin kamala etelu si sawosoto wolula ayo bunda falin.
The Criminal Procedure Code was amended, Section 99.
Andung kukurungulu tamandi kiti bunda nyim fanan falingo keta jele 699.
The right to bail was taken away in respect of capital offenses.
Inata bail ko bondi yo buruka ka foko ning amari kujaw baleke kujaw kuntonko ka fome capital offense wala mo fa na nyon doluti bail rote keno la yo bondi je bail ko bondi wol kono.
By this time, Mr. Dabo and his team were already granted bail by the High Court.
Bari wo bekela tumo mengo yatra Mr. Dabo na la kafo molu High Court ye bail di wala tumo.
So we are still faced with that problem. If you are charged with murder or manslaughter now, you don't have bail.
Nimbide wo kole yako ben kanjanne hanbi katabula bila niye muta mo fala ete bail no la hanbi wala belorin.
So that particular section 99, was designed to actually prevent Mr. Dabo and co from getting bail from the court.
Kam doko yo loi bunda min londi wanyama yo min fale wanyama ya kele pour Mr. Dabo ana monyoli kana bail sotono.
That's quite true.
Was it passed before the application for bail came up, or the ruling, or after?
Fakada wadi juma kabrin kudundiro kada foko paralembang fo kabrin kudundiro kerin kola.
It came after bail was initially granted by Justice Monahan.
Anata wato mengo yatara Justice Monahan ye bail kango di nyilile foka pare ukola lo nyin kaunata.
There was then a pending appeal before the Gambia Court of Appeal against the ruling of Justice Monahan.
Andu wotumo balango be dending wo bail kunyala kitibunda bato kabalang Justice Monahan la o bail kuala.
The state succeeded in that appeal.
Bitum mansanata silo sotonne wo sainkandiroto.
But the justices of the Court of Appeal again tied the hands of the state not to rearrest and detain the accused persons. The respondents in the appeal. That's Mr. Dabo and his group.
Kitindila mbeje oto fanana ta kaumenta mandi wala mnyentiko ikana wo kudendi ngo jindi na waira abe dendi ne follow purunyin kamala Mr. Dabo na akafunyolu ikanana wulu sainka muta ni ebula ke bel ni ebula.
Okay. The other aspect of the law that it affected was on jury trial. The 1997 Constitution provided for jury trial.
1997 Constitutional. When kalin ne ko kito dulse kenole jury trial te wala mo jama kasi ka kito kundu.
I remember when Mr. Dabo and his co-accused persons were arraigned, they refused to take their plea because they said they needed to see the law that was going to be enacted on jury trial.
Biri telunati Mr. Dabo na lamolu ibalanta le katu muneketa iko ilafta lonnale lua nying membe ako nying koma abelari nyadile menketa jama kitindo la karolati ikafome jury trial.
That also delayed the commencement of the trial in the murder case itself.
Wala fanana take kuti wala wo balango wala kolu dukundi wala ka mendi puru kito nying menketa wo mofa kito nying janabe datila ay watita.
And what was the essence of that particular amendment?
So amona kuma ta wo falendro mi alongo elafta kolaga muna akumandi.
The Constitution provided for a right to it gave a right to accused persons to opt for jury trial. That was a constitutional provision.
Constitutional nyin sembo di molu lale pour isinyin kaning pour ni bela ko kitila asike mo jama kito di mo jama sisi ya kito kunna ikafome jury trial. Constitutional yo sembo di molu lale mutokolo.
So, but then it further went on to state that Parliament should prepare the enabling legislation.
Bari continent kanyum foko dibite bungu nyanta fere kelale ye loi dada me ya lonko wole be kala kulu sono ya ndirawti wo sarto la karola.
That law had not been enacted by the time the accused persons were arraigned before the High Court.
Wo loi woyatara amang lodla soton follow dame ya lonko isa tamandinu na okiti bundala ite lakoto otembo.
Like I said, that delayed the commencement of the trial for a
while.
I'm not very sure, but I have a feeling that there was an amendment that came. I have to confirm that.
But whatever the case, it's clear that jury trials do not actually operate in the Gambia as we speak.
But the court said la no nyanya dorong alon tala senya telefona ko coming ka kitindira jama me bendi pro yemo kitindi ina kuntundiro ga umu feneti mialanko abuga kenyim banko kanyang.
We used to have jury trial. But along the line it was taken out.
Neneka kitindiro kele nungo nyama. Bari bitum bewole kanun wati nata soto ya mumeo bondi ya buruka.
It was brought in by the 1997. It was brought back by the 1997 Constitution.
But in 1997 Constitution wale ya murundina.
But it was not in practical operation because as we speak right now, it is not something that actually operates in the court system, in the criminal justice system.
That I cannot capture exactly, but there was an amendment. But it was given as a right under the 97 Constitution.
Falimu ketale men tilinta okola bari bitum hakilo mamuta wati men kilimu bari 1997 Constitution ya dabula ndi okono linu.
And would you say that that was also another amendment that was used by the political system to influence or exert greater control over the judicial process because they could control one man easier than they could control, about 20-something or 30-something people,
depending on
the size of the judicial.
That's quite true. But there was also equally a potential danger. Unless the law was made or was enacted, you stand to your detriment if you opt for jury trial And then you have a group of July 22nd boys being paraded as jurors before a court.
Wo fanan asa keno le bari kudo men fanan beje ni man na manta be soto wo moja malu menu bina ka fokete la kitoke ni immantalu walita ite mariye July 22nd la molu nata na beng men ya lonko iko wolle bete la kito kundula bitode wo bekela kumanele.
Mr. Touré, let's move on.
Mr. Touré will continue.
To the 2006 court-martial cases. I believe you were representing some clients in that particular court-martial.
Ngata 2006 kitio mi alonko wale keta sojaro la kiti bungoto. Nte jikita ko ite keta multi mi alonko ilota moyenne pour ka fasa ka bondi ya tumi minna.
If we could just go through it briefly, highlighting the issues there of fundamental human rights, violations of human rights, for example, torture and the right to fair hearing.
Andu na telefona soti yandiri kamba isa dungo fana la ye domandi mfonya je ya soti yandi komi nyantol tinyata je nya hadma dungo la nyanto ya tinyanya dile wo kiti bungo nyinto.
Following the 2006 abortive coup.
In 2006 coup d'etat bayringo botala.
The civilians and the soldiers were all charged and they were arraigned before the High Court.
Civilianolu anin sojarolu ye betumi ye londi High Court nyatelimula.
The trial in the High Court got stalled because many of the defense counsel withdrew their representation.
Kito nyin tamata nyame High Court anasita katu mo jama bije meni alonko be lorin tankola karolela woliye da bondije muruta koma.
Why would defense counsel have cause to withdraw their representation for clients that they had agreed to represent?
Munat na sa loyal mi alan ko lota pour ka mol bondi ye mol mi aye 2 ye nasi ko tay ya foko e manta lola pour ka wol lo wol ye ko ten ye 2 mindi ko mina munat na wo bekela.
You know, we had a perception that the judge who was assigned the file had a sympathy for the state.
Ndel nga nyina miro soto no dumo ko jojo wala kitindila me ya lonka belori mansa kundaye wo nyina ba nga nyoto pour ka mansa kunda fasa.
Which judge are you referring to?
Omo kiti tela jumadi.
This was the former DPP and then he later became Chief Justice Chief Akomaye Ajim.
Ngamira utembo ekafome Chief Akomaye Ajim wole moti me ya lonka martanyin kito lulanya la ngamira utumo wole nyanta lola akito nyin kunto.
In all fairness to him, he hadn't manifested anything to warrant us reaching that conclusion.
Tonya purka tonya tamandi amang kukede mensi utaman sero itandin telula ko alafta fasa rolela.
But taking from the fact that he was the DPP for 2 consecutive terms.
Bari ni ajube ataketa DPP ti hani for sanji fula mume obe.
It was like getting a prosecutor to be a judge in your case.
Amunta kitindirla niyo ta yake ko wale be kito fanan kuntu laitla ko nyin kono.
So because of that long career as DPP and his closeness with the executive, we had fears that the accused persons may not get justice.
Nsilata kadumuna nsilande anim banko kundonko la kulu katata nyola bake andu wokola fanan anatake moti memeta o palaso to DPP palaso so wale nsilande nga nyimutako nyimmolu ate yamfaleje.
Mr. Touré, I mean, you do say that you didn't have any cause to believe that he would be impartial in the case, but if you look at his track record as DPP, if he had exercised independence during his role as DPP, I don't think defense counsel would have been so anxious about his current position.
Coming iya fo nyame ko coming ife amanke modi mi alon ka be lala abu aldo monyo doka wala be lala moka bar coming niya jibi ala tariko to kabri wato mi alon ko akata DPP ta abe mol kitindi kan niya jibi kabri wato fo bi fo se ku bonni no le kaytandi la ko asifa saroke no le ba.
Yes, like I was saying, if you look at the general setting in the country at the time,
kumba fokan nyame ni ko lulanya jube kenema banko kan wotembo
though we were seemingly democratic quote and unquote.
Yo bari bitu tumo menka fo anin menka yitandi wala nyindi ko democracy le banko kan.
But in reality it was a dictatorship.
Bar to nya tajire mararo le be kerin nungo tumo.
And the dictatorship that came
adungo tajire mararo anata kenyama
post-elections
sako karte fayo tambiringo
was worse than the dictatorship that we had during full military dispensation.
wala fango jawyata tajire ya mararoti karte fayo kola ka tambi wato me yalonko abe otumo hani karte fayo nyim fango manke folo.
Because he had a long career as a DPP and he had interacted with the state for a very long time, he has defended the interests of the state. So we had a fear that it was all not safe for him to be assigned the case.
Kato tembo, ame bata o palaso tole o DPP palaso. Amanda wala, anim mansakunda meta nyobulu bakele sako mansakunda kundonkolu. Wodalilo le silangodu nintel kono ko woto, nyimu moleti me yalonko. Ate tilingo tamandi la nyin safar bundala abe palaso mentuteng ako wotumo birin tilingo silango soton sondomo kono bitungole ya kendidal ndel fanal nga quota wo nyama.
So we raised concerns and we asked him to recuse himself. He refused. So we met as a defense team and decided that some members of the defense team should withdraw just to paralyze the hearing of the matter.
Bitundal kafta nyoma kallo ka fonte lebe lolan te lebe kala loyalty nyim moli yo bitunga kata puru ate safan da bondi kito nyin kono bari bira balanta andol fanal nata folo bitum menu be loring mutamole nga jibe puru modol fanal bije ye da bondi kito nyin to puru kito nyin silamfu isaje asilamfu nyama me ya lonkatina ate tamanola.
So the state could not proceed with the matter because of lack of lawyers.
Bitum man sakunda man kito nyin tamandino katu man lawyer sotong.
And that was a requirement in capital offenses.
Yes, you cannot proceed to hear a charge against an accused person who is charged with treason unless he is legally represented.
Otembo lawyer nyino foko etembo kitindino la meya lonko lawyer mansa lawyer mantra caring mensi lo no atemari ye mansa kundate o mari kitindino la onyama otumo fay mo soto meya lonko lebelo la ye lawyer la karol.
So because of the withdrawal of the defense, most of the defense team, the case stalled in court.
Kato tumo menu nyanta lola o muta molie wairi olube muruta koma yeda bondije kito manatano kato itelefonal man sakundata kito nyin tamandino la nimuta molu man loyal soto membe loleye wala nata kito nyin nasindi fu amantano.
So they were therefore forced to sever the case file into two. They took the soldiers to the army barracks, that is Yundum, and created a court martial.
Between Atamuneke, ye ko fata fulat. Sojarolu membe ko kono yolu samba Yundum, pour que kitin di sojar silola. Woto malu yola ko sam landi karala.
Were you in both cases, in the treason trial at the High Court and the court
both in the treason trial and both in the court martial and in the treason trial.
Don kito nyim fanna fulo benga be mal sojar kitindo la karola ndabi jele ibe kitindi la jamfa jawla tumo men na kabanko jamfa trisin ndabe wotole fana menketa moluti civilian oluti yemenno kitindi akokama.
I represented Yaya Dabo in the court martial.
Ndele lota Yaya Dabo ye sojar kitindo nyinto.
And I represented Aliou Job in the treason in the High Court.
Alu ndele lota Aliou Job ye fana High Court jamfa jaw kito la koto.
Were there any things that stood out during the trial, especially in terms of the treatment of the accused persons?
Fo fembi jere mi yalon ko isafo ko wokadala na manya nakake sakatma nina ta fanna la mi yalon ko wala multi ye mil tumi fo ye kukela mi yalon ko manya nakake
during the pre-trial detention.
O wato ya tara fangi me samba folo kiti bundato ibe mutokon.
Yes, Yaya Dabo, we went through, when they attempted to tender his cautionary statement, we went through a voir dire because it was our contention that the state cautionary statement was not voluntarily obtained. They were seriously tortured. So we went into a voir dire.
Nata kito la nyame
a trial within a trial.
Ikavame voir dire wolem kiti be kiti kono. Nata osilo leta katun tata muneje Yaya Dabo utumo ngajele ko yetaje ya bale kala ku dimendingo abe okole kono nutumo wodalilo le ya sabu koni nata nata nyamin ngake woleti kiti be kiti kono mfanali ngata mandi wole silola.
And the BORRY trial, which is a trial within a trial, was to test the voluntariness of that particular statement to see whether it was obtained, through torture or other forms of duress or undue influence.
Andu niaje aliyewo kiti be kiti kona aliyake wo alefta ka lonne wo kuma kongol mi yalon ko ya wole ta wo mo min bulu ye min tumi ya safi alefta ka lon komi yo kuma kongol tabul nyam fo ya tabul de to kono bang abe ya detendile ya ta wala fo ya lipale fo ya tajire yale al kiti yo lefta ka wala long wala na ko kiti nga kiti yo ke kiti yo kono kote.
Yes, that was the main purpose for a voir dire.
Wala ma daliloti de pour ka kiti be kiti kono.
And yeah, I was the first to go through voir dire.
Yeah, mo foloti mendunta o kiti fason kono kiti be kiti kono.
What was the strength of his case in terms of his allegations of torture against the state?
Kuma atela diamoni a sembo soto nyale komi ya tumi romin nan.
I wouldn't be able to remember now the details, but his testimony, I believe, lasted for 4 days.
Hakilo ta akobe mutanola tamata nyami. Barala kito atatal han fotil nani.
And because we had feared that the rest of the other accused persons may not have the same opportunity, his evidence was not limited to him in person alone.
Katu man silo soto no kafuta dolu makatu atela kito kono CDR kolu menu finteta je amanda ngate fango kungo dam manade.
Every form of torture, every form of violation, every form of abuse was captured in his narration.
Ala kuma kangolu kono tajire ya faso wo faso nyimantani ya faso wo faso tilimbali ya faso wo faso kujawo ke hadamadingu jatola a façon bele fintita ala diamo kono ye menke ala bringa e bewo muto kono.
Looking at your client and some of the other accused persons, was it clear, was it apparent just by looking at them that they had been indeed tortured?
Komi ita ni nata wo tumir mol jibe anita fongo momi yalan ko ibelori wole fo niya mari jibe dore ishalon no ko nyinde to nya bulo matala ba.
Yes, indeed. In fact, as at the time when they were arranged, some of them had their injuries. They had not completely healed.
Katu mune natake hani watu memfongo mbenyin dia mola ni ejube kajele ko nyil molu be mantoro le kono be baramaring katu yatara imahani kende ya fango folo.
I believe Wasakamara came here and testified before the TRRC.
Ngamira Wasakamara nata janna CDR ke TRRC nyatil ngule jam.
Wasa was able to pick his broken teeth, in the NIA, in the hall where they were tortured. He had it in his pocket and it was tendered as an item of exhibit in the trial.
Kito kono Wasakamara anyingo men katita watu me be nyininka ka ye tajire ya men kela hanufo ya nyingo kati atatala jifo kono la adum watu membe o kito keka o sojar kito aya nyingo fango bondile alaw nying katiringo ka ke sede jorangoti kito nying kono.
We even subpoenaed for the medical record of the treatment, the medical treatment they were subjected to as a result of the torture. And the doctors were willing to come to provide that evidence, but there was state interference in that also.
Na nyimfango kani me ya lonko wole mu lopitan kayto luti docteur oli menu safe nyim molie biriyo tajire nya jawo kela ye mantorol nim baladimengulu menu soto adon docteur olu fogolu paretale wulita pour kana o CDR ke bari kota ke man sakunda ya dabula je kunduta docteur olu nyato pour olu kana na o CDR la.
How did the state interfere in that process?
When we prepared our subpoena and sent it to RVH, the place was punctuated by the NIA officers who were there. They physically threatened them that whoever produces those, in fact, the doctors ended up not coming to court. Threatening them not to come to court.
Prul doctorol yena wo ko senendi min fon keta fon il wo doctorol nyin ketol min be bulu kay tande ko tonya nyine keta wi wasa ya nyungo wutole ya lipala nyungo be bota da kono ye silandilo fon ko karo ko momo nata kiti bundato pour kana wo se deandro du ibe bula ngata on kono.
How did you come to know about this particular information?
When we file our subpoena, you know very well as a practicing lawyer, when you file a subpoena, you make a follow-up on it.
Benganna wasida safe ifanga alone ko kul katama nyame ninga tara nyin kusiba bekere ne safero ka pour ka ko no masara.
I personally followed this issue at the RVH.
ndefan kunde mo bulata nyin ko nyin no ma e lopitan baro
And they told us that the NIA came there and took those files away. They
andu
don't have
yenyi
them.
e même fanyi wala nyindi ko NIL na rajala andu yenyi fayol tala e ni tata
Did the voir dire succeed in the end?
Fo wo kiti kabla kiti bula kiti kono fanata na benne no bang.
Well, the cautionary statements of all of them were admitted in evidence.
kiti onyi bijo nyi gono ila kuma kan onyi mensa fere da kiti e ulbe tala e dundi la fere sele jarol kande
And that means it did not succeed.
No, it did not.
Koto momenti amanna beng.
man na dum
Despite the clear evidence of torture in those
It was
cases.
visible on their bodies.
tajire ya men lata kam fa hanni mi nyalo ta kam fa ka sene mal ko e tajire yale
So, in fact, defense counsel had valid fears about the particular judge in that case.
Ando fanga mi lawyer mi yalan ko wole lote fanga way silan da bunda sotole kiti ndila la ko nyinto. Mi nyanta kiti teo kala.
Well, that's quite true.
to nyalti
Can you tell us what happened in the court martial
Isa fonya no mune na teke wo sojar kiti dulado.
in relation to your client, Yaya Dabo?
Mi na tetela kleano la karola ka fo mi Yaya Dabo.
You know, we were all sure they were going to be convicted.
to
because
be
this
lata
thing was
nyin
set
nal ko
for that,
be soron nale kiti onyi ko la
right? But then
bari
there was an open discriminatory treatment.
bari ye la mara nyame na fatam fanso dunda ko nyin gono le wo yolande kene baldo
This was a This was a treason involving people from every sector of our society.
ni mom ku tumur le me alon ko ye menu tumera jamfa jawle me alon ko boran e mo le me alon ko boran na fannal beldo na
By
jama
that I mean all the tribes were involved.
ninko sifa do nyinde wala nyinde ko sio sifa bele bulata ko nyin ko
During the course of the court martial,
sojare kiti onyin na wato nyin kono betama ka wato men
4 of the accused persons were being chained, that is handcuffed, that is Bunja, Yaya Dabo, Farinsanyang, and Wasa Kamara.
tumir mo nano mo nani be jamian ko tumir mo lay tol ibulol ni ke bulol cheni le wala farin sanya Yaya Dawud anum bunja
We have Bunja, Yaya, Farinsanyang, and Wasa Kamara.
ani wasa kamara nyim mo nano ay mem foten
Well, the discrimination was quite apparent. We complained about it.
fatam fanso nyin keta kuler me alon ko amanga ba kene balto andum fanam ma bo nga fole
Justice Ajim made an order that it's unlawful, it's not right.
Justice Ajim narana kango di to nyala nyum mu kulde me alon ko amanyang andum nyanda tinyala
These 4 individuals you mentioned, which tribe did they belong to?
Mo nano yemel fotem. Wol bota
All 4 of them were
bota shi juma.
Mandinkas.
tol mo nano be mo mandingolel
So people from all other tribes were part of the trial. It was a large group.
mo jamal le beje me alon ko mo be membe be beje be bora si le do andum mo jamal lam kafo nyin kafolem
Our understanding is that it was the head of the army who insisted that those people must continue to be chained.
nara na nyim faham ko sojaro la kuntiyo nyi wala nara nyim bala nyin ko umol nyanna kala molle me alon ko yetu cheno kono don sitring
And this was not coincidence this time.
No.
Anu fanyin do agara fenati me ay be benta nyoltile rek.
In fact, I remember at that time we raised the issue. Ajim made a statement that he has made his order, but if the authorities are not going to comply with it, he does not want to take it as an issue.
hakilo bakang sinya sabando narna ko nyi wosi dala ko take bare jojo nyi mem ajimti ay mem fo wala nyiti ko manto nun ay kango dile bar sila ni nyaron kol man nyi ay kango men di ni nyaron kol man kanta manda ko nyi do rata ku do keno la je ko tek
And during the actual proceedings themselves, were they still chained?
Bare fo wato na kitiyo nyi fon datita be kere no fo hani wo ye blol city labang.
No, they would chain them in the vehicle according to them in mile 2.
bare tole mem foro nyindi moroko no kabona kasi bumba to ke bulul chen na wolto moroko no
And then they will bring them up to Yundum Barracks.
ibe natla fo yundum la sojare kordado
Escort them inside the officers' mess where the court martial was taking place.
sinana e samba la officers mesto damen do yalon ko kitiyo nyi ngata ke o bungo nyi nakon
And thereafter, they will remove the cuffs.
jeto sinela bulo cheni ro bulol nyi ye cheni
When the
nyame
matter
ya
is adjourned, they will again cuff them in the court and then escort them.
nin kitiyo nyi ya lungo sawndi ko tanke to sina ye bulol chene ko tanke ye tentendi ye bulandi moto la ko tanke
And criminal trials in the Gambia are usually done in public. Is that correct?
No yalan ja nibe mol kitin la mi yalan ko ye kuja wala ke ikake mol la kono.
Can you tell us if anything unusual happened in this particular case?
Fo isa fo no fo fenketa la mi yalan ka man nyanna ka keke.
Yes, on the day of the judgment,
lungo mena kiti nyana kuntula
as a matter of fact, the whole conduct of the proceedings was done in the open.
ko anyanta nu nyame ko sikitio nyimbe ala tamon triblo nyimbe keta nyame abe keta jamala kono kumanu
On the day of the judgment,
lungo mena nyana kitio nyana kuntula
I was the first to arrive.
ntele keta mo folo de men furata dingira nyinto
When I reached,
birim furata
they said we were supposed to wait under a tree.
ko nyanta mbatula yiro dole koto
So the arrangement was that
le ko la nyamu
they
nyinatinu
wouldn't allow members of the press
ite silo di la pour kibar talalla
and members of the families of the accused
ani
persons.
muta mol nyinna faila dimba yala mol fana ite silo di la wala
So I said, if that is the situation, we will boycott the judgment.
ko yo je don defana ko je ni ngata ko la nyaabe wala nyaama won defana be kiti teyo nyimba jam falala
After the delivery of the judgment, we will make a statement to condemn it.
nin kiti yo ni akundu fay pare do fana bina kuma ko findin la pour ka kuma ko ka kiti yo kundur nyaani ngana doya
Do you know why they took that particular position on this particular day?
Na ite yalo ne muna dina ye ñun lo dulata ñun lu nga fongala.
From what we understand is that it was the head of the army who was interfering.
ndolo nga fahamu ro nga mem fahamu mi sojaro la nyaaton ko ni wala keta modi me yalon ko atel ka dabula ko nyin kono
Because he had a sense of apprehension what would be captured in the content of the judgment.
ka to nyin kamala ko ay sobo soto ko nyin kono me yalon ko kiti yo nyin me yalon ni akundu ko nyin be findila nyame ay do man ni so sere ako nyin kono
Who was the head of the army at that time?
Jumale amiyo le kunton ko te o wado.
It was my own brother, Lanto.
fanko to malem fondo ko ma lantom bon
His full name, please.
Slantom Montamba.
lantom bon tamba
And he obviously took direct orders from Jame.
Yes, of course.
Okay. How did that end?
Wala bantanya dila.
Well, we maintain our ground that we will not enter the judgment hall unless all the pressmen who were present were allowed access.
kon tita kiti kuntutla nyindo dingira nyindo bungo nyingono ning funding atra yesilo di kibar talal ani kibar dilal ni dimbaya mulla
And same with members of the families of the accused persons.
aning tumir mol nyinda dimbaya mulla fon yesilo di wala
So they thought we were going to give in, but to their disappointment, we stayed put.
jikira nun ko asikero ndolo kuma ka nyim ba be nyina la bari hanin ka bindol fana na kuma ka nyim bambanta na kuma le kan lota wala ka
When they realized that time was running out,
bri natana kala mura ko nyinde wato bida kanne
they said now, well, they will allow members of the media to come in.
silang inatana kan falin ko rege ko silang kibar talani ebe silo lile le pour yena
They invited us to go.
inatana mbunya to kuma de pour ngana
We still again refused.
hanin ka bi mbalanda ko tanke
He said family members must all be allowed in.
je don ko hanin ka bi mura mol nyinda dimba ya mol nyin hanin ka bi fo silo dila yena e dungi la
They
moy
said they were not going to do so.
e ko ita wokela
We refused to go in.
mfana mbalanda pour kata dun kono to kala si
In the final analysis,
ko nyinya la ba nyin
they were making calls, Office of the President, Army Headquarters.
ebe
all
komandiro
over.
le kala telephone ro komandiro le president office to ani sojaro la korda bato
They had no choice. They had to allow everybody.
nye nyala ba nyi mang fere o fere so bare be menkela wala nyindo kasilo di mol mo bele pour ye dun bun kono ye la moy kito nyimbe kuntula nyame
And judgment was delivered.
jeldo binata na kito nyim kuntu
But after the delivery of judgment,
bare kito nyim biring akuntri ngo kola
we filed our appeals.
ntolngan na murun kandi kito nyim pour nga murun kan ka korosi kuke
We followed
He
on the
didn't
record.
tell us whether the judgment was successful or not.
Ima fo mo le fo kiti te yo nya natana labanya dile.
They were all convicted.
e tol be soronne
And they were given different sentencing.
andung ye be soronni
Yes.
nyala me alan ko ifatatale wato le be mellala ifatatale
On some counts, life imprisonment, some
dolbe
20 years.
dolbe siole dangol kala je dolbe sanji monne kala kasoto
So we filed our appeals,
nganna appeal of dundi safe nga file
and I strenuously followed on the records, the appeal records.
hanin kabi o apilo nyi o murun kan kesi kiti o nyi ngambulata saferol no ma killing
File could not be seen anywhere,
file o nyi amanje no handin kira killing
not anywhere in the judiciary.
kiti bunda nyi do handin kira killing file o nyi
Made a
manje
personal follow-up on this with the judge advocate.
jojo nyi mealon ko atele lori nyi kiti o kunda nyi kuna nan kunya kola no bulata no kan pour ka nyini
He told me he has nothing to do with the file. On the day he delivered judgment, he gave all the records to the army.
ako atamang fensora be menkela nyi file o bala file o nyi lungo men na jojme kiti o kunto nyi ya karang wolungo nyi ya case file o nyi ta ya di sojaro la
I
nyata
wrote letters
letterol safe
number of times,
sinya jama
made follow-ups.
ngabulata no kan
Nothing happened.
umanke
Were you
So
able
now-
to proceed with a substantial appeal without those records?
No, we couldn't.
ani ma okay no mambula no okay case nyon no pour nga no masara nga jube kadu manfeñ
Not one single appeal was had.
ani appeal killing murun kan kiti killing manke
Up
akoni
to now, we have not set an eye on that file.
ani kabin ben bitlo men do file ni nya keso mamlo aka
And in fact, their constitutional right to appeal was violated.
Certainly.
ni muila ila nyanto tinyata la puru nyin kamala puru case nyin ku ila kidia mo nyin puru ay murun kan jube ku ila nyanto tinya woto
But that was not into the government at the time.
bari o man o jamma sakunda jamano lo nyin manke kuti i tolbulu wato la
Thank you very much.
Baraka.
Mr. Toure, there was another case in which you handled where, as a consequence of certain decisions, a particular high court judge, I believe he was a magistrate then made, he was dismissed.
Mr. Toure, malam fo hakilo baka na bara diamu do kata non kiti bunda to mi alan ko da kata je wo wato wo mari nyin wo mu nyin kiti ndila dingol la te ka fo e magistrate to amanke no jojo te folo inata na baya la do ko la fo se fem fo no nya wota ba.
Yes, that was the case of IGP versus Keba Conte and Sekou Conte.
ha wala m case ti me yalon ko police wol le ba kono aning Sekou Conte ke ba konde to le bo case nyin kono
But let me say before I proceed with that, there was a lot of interference even in civil matters.
bar nga kumandim fo jannim be nyin mo fulo la case fola folo ku jamalel pe jame yalon ko dabula jamalel pe jame yalon ko kake modamal da case to dabula jamal la kake akoni to
It was the order of the day. When you have a matter, a dispute with someone, you just go to any one of these generals.
ñina mun ko ñin tamandiri ñatin wo jamano lanu ni moye ku laño bula ño tema drom e kam men kado e kata ñi ñaton ka kunton ko le kan surtout ñin tan ko bunda mulla
And they had no hesitation, they will interfere in the matter.
andun ku buka hani tongu fang e ke dabula ko ñin kono
The case of the Conte brothers,
ñin konton fulol ñin
they bought a set, it's their younger brother, one Abdoulaye Conte.
ido ko ma dole me ka fo me Abdoulaye Conte
He bought a parcel of land
ay keno dole sang
from one Abdoulaye Cham in Sukuta.
andang ayasa membo mobulu ka fo me kendingili ka fo me Abdoulaye Cham sukuta ba sada
They went through the transfer process.
itata kul men bela luwa lande nyamen ka konin ka transfer pour ta ya esa on ka bonin do nyimari do ka nyimari do to
Apparently,
nyaato do manding
unbeknown to the two brothers, the transfer document had not been completed. The transfer procedure had not been
nyin koto
completed.
fulol mem ke ba konde se ko konto di nada na fure la londo do ko nyin korda nyin kenode ala sawndiro ka bonin wa firla kan ka samba sandirla ka ko nyin hansa amanto bendi folode
When they bought the transfer forms, they paid the relevant capital gains tax.
biri ye fomo sang andu ye transfer cool be to poto andu wolan capital gain tax yo be jo
They thought that was all about the transfer process.
so liyo nyin mira wolam ko nyin be dandulati pour transfer nyin na tamandiri
So
nya
they took the transfer document and kept it.
itata nyin kayto nyin ta ya mabo
But it was in the same year of the purchase
bari wo sankili ngon nyin nen wato mena firo keta
that they fenced the land.
keno nyin ta ya sansang
More than 10 years down the line,
sangitan ko nyin firo nyin kola
Abdoulaye Cham came to the site and said that he did not sell to them all that parcel of land.
nyin Abdoulaye Cham nyin anata keno nyin dingira nyin to ako amman nyin keno nyin dingira yemen be sansang ama wafi ima
And the fencing took place
sansandiro keta
in the year of the purchase.
sango men na firo keta
And when they were about to commence fencing work, according to them,
biringi bina damu taro kela pour ka la dingira nyin sansang ko
they
itoli
had
yafo nya
invited him to come to the site for him to confirm that this was the piece of land that
Yeah.
he sold to them.
ya bunya to kumandi lati Abdoulaye Cham pour ay nama be dingira nyin do pour kay tandala fo ya fay ko dingira nyin fele men wafi ma andum fele bina damu dal pour ka sansang
So when he raised those queries that these people have fenced more than the fair area that he sold to them,
biring atena na kuma kan nyin fundinde ada kono ka fo ko nyimmolde ale dulale sansa me alon ko ntenga me wafa al tambitale
he went ahead and knocked down part of the fence.
atententa pour ka fenso dingira dolta ke ka boy
So they lodged a complaint against him at the police.
inata na ko nyinta ya bole police dingira do
Police went into the matter.
police olta dingira nyinto
They charged him.
ye tumiro la kan
They took him to the court.
ya samba kiti bula
Then
dingira
when they were taking him,
biri ba sambala
they did not notify the complainants.
me wosila nyin imo kala mutandi.
He went to court
Itara kiti lado.
and he pleaded guilty.
Sonta tumiro la emen laka.
He was cautioned and discharged.
Tu kiti ya dandarla andu ya bula.
The complainants in the meanwhile did not even know that the trial took place.
Wo kuntun ko nyi menta mo men wosila ti nyin atamalon ko ku kiti o fambe tar aketale.
So he then went and filed a civil case against them.
Anata ki dundiro ke samanero ke moya lon ko e kafme civil case me alon ko damma ni damma yamo membe molni dammal tema
In the magistrate court.
anata nawo ki dundi kiti bundandi ngodo.
It was in the magistrate court that the two complainants in the criminal charge came to realize that, in fact, their criminal complaint reached the court and was determined.
Kiti bundandi ngodo na nyimmo fulo mu wosila fulo le nata na lo wolto ko tonya yara fan nyin case nyin anata nan janna yara fan kiti bulato jande bari ya dundi nin janne ni kuriya silo le ba me criminal court le wo wato le to ya lon ko yara fa nyin case ya nata nu janne ko man.
What magistrate dealt with the criminal complaint?
Jumalem kiti lati mi alon ko wolel sita wo kiti o kundo.
I cannot remember now on top of my head because, like I said, the complainants did not know of the trial. It was my humble self who tried to trace the close file.
We
photocopied it, and it was in the file that I confirmed that yes, he has actually been taken to court and he pleaded guilty. I cannot now remember who was the magistrate. So, but Abdullah Cham did not pursue the civil case. It was struck out. Now with the backing of some people, he went to lodge a complaint at the police. He said the transfer documents that the Conte brothers had, those documents were forged. So the police looked into the matter. They charged the two Conte brothers. And let me say this, that Abdullah Conte, who bought this land, was not charged. And the sale took place in his presence. It was his elder brothers, one of whom had custody of the document. It was those two elder brothers who were charged. So matter started in Brikama Magistrate's Court. After the close of the prosecution's case,
Who was the magistrate involved? Sorry.
The file kept changing from one hand to the other. I remember at the beginning it was Manyima who I think got appointed by the GRA. But then subsequently it came into the hands of Magistrate Jaita as it then was.
What was his first name, Magistrate?
He's now a judge of the High Court. So he looked through the file after my no case submission.
Just explain what a no case submission is in summary.
No case submission simply is that when the state brings a charge against a person,
no case submission ni amwe tu abukanga wala ni mansala karola waranto mende tumiro de mokanga ni ara tumiro nati na mokanga kitidlato.
And the witnesses for the prosecution have all testified. If you consider in your mind that if not made out a prima facie case,
what is a prima facie case?
Muna prima facie case.
Prima facie case is to lead evidence linking the accused persons to the offense.
Wala prima facie case wala nga sedandro di me yalon ko abe tumiri mo nyi aba chokila tumiro nyi na ya tumi menna.
So you can ask the court to dismiss the charge.
Je to ita membe lori ngo tumiri mo nyi se kanindro keno kiti o nyati no ka fo kiti e ko pour ay bayro ke tumiro la menda o tumi mo nyi kan.
So in essence, the prosecution had not met the minimum requirement in terms of the evidence that they were required to produce for that case.
Amunta prosecution wala police warando mansala karola itol man kuma kan sahare ngo di kiti o nyati no memba sababu la ko pour kiti o la ko nyintu molde tumiro mel lay kan ye asorata ikanne.
Well, that was our application. Sometimes you succeed on it, but sometimes it's dismissed.
Wala mun tolla danir dade wato do ika safaro kel danir la kiti o bul wato do ika ganyele bar wato do ika boyle.
So when His Worship Jaite went through the file, he discovered that in fact this land is not situated within the jurisdiction of the Brikama Magistrate.
Wato la His Worship Jaite biringa tata enyi file kono be jube aya yele anata na kala mutandi ko tonya nyinke no nyimmen faalo ko abe diamo kono kenele abe dingiral to me yalon ko amandra Brikama la kiti bunda dingira kono.
So he struck out the matter.
Anata na case nyimbai.
He was sacked.
Ya bay
He was arrested.
Ya muta.
Detained.
Ya sindidlo akili.
He was in self-charge.
Sorry?
He was in self-charge.
Did
this kind of thing ever happen before to a magistrate where they were arrested, detained, charged?
As
a direct result of the decision that they made during the course of their duties.
Do ko nyin kono me alon ko wala mu do ko tamadre nyaade na nyin ko le kan fo kule me alon ko akela ba.
Yes, it was a common practice
to
sack magistrates.
Okay,
but to go to the extent of actually arresting them, detaining them, and charging them.
But funny honey ka bi man daw goto don ke bayro kata fo ka ike muta ke sindi dula ke lingi ka tumiro le kan.
I think that started in the case of His Worship Jaite.
Ngamiro da mutata His Worship Jaite la wato mem amuwote.
But there was a second, there was a repeated incident also.
But hani ka bi murunka kudo fana ngere me ko murunkanta keta.
One of our traveling magistrates in Jareng.
Na magistrate do beje mena kititela do beje me ko akatamala kata dinkiraldo membe nu Jareng.
Magistrate Danso.
Ikafa magistrate Danso
was also arrested.
Atafana ina ya mutale.
Detained.
Ya sindidlo akili.
And charged.
Ye tumiro le denga kangoda.
In fact, his detention.
Andung hani ka bi ala muto ka sindidlo akili mfa.
Came during the impasse.
Aketa wati la watu mena politiko hata jube hata jirim bake mbangku kanja wala December.
It was after Jammeh's departure.
Andung aketa nyame wala kabrin Jammeh banko bula.
That he was released from detention.
Watu le ya bula ka bondi mudokono.
Do you remember the case of Magistrate Jabang?
Foi hakilo si Magistrate Jabang fanan na ko mutanova.
Yes, I believe he to.
Tikita ata fananta.
Forgotten about, but I think a similar incident. He was not charged, but he was detained.
Can we just look at the last case? Because I'm sure the commissioners want to go home before we wrap it up. The NIA Diamond case.
The NIA Diamond case, I got the tip of the information from one Nafi Jammeh. Nafi, I believe, was Sister Toya Jammeh. He's from Kanilai.
Nafi de njikita ko abari musulama te me alon ko ya Jammeh bari musola ndu ngapota Kanilai.
He happened to have known Dr. Alamin.
Bari aketa Dr. Alamin ay along.
One day in the evening,
lunkiling ularo.
She called me to inform me that doctor has been arrested.
Ayan kumandi kan kala mutandi nyinna ko doctor de ya mutale.
By the NIA.
Andu menu ya muda wallam NIA.
So she told me that he has been seriously tortured.
Akbara nyim fonyale ko yew ya tajire ya bakela de.
And that she was afraid that if I did not get up quickly,
andu nga konye ko na be silare nyinna ninga tarante maguli tariyaringe.
He could lose his life.
Asikeno ayfo ala balwala.
This was in the night.
Ngeta sudola.
I told her, well, call me in the morning following day tomorrow. As a matter of fact, when I went to office, this was on a Saturday, I forgot about doctor's issue. So Nafi gave me a reminder call.
na finata nan kumandi kan hakilo bulande
I quickly rushed to the NIA.
tariyaringe tata NIA law kordaro
When I arrived, I insisted that I wanted to see Dr. My client.
rim futata lota nyin kan don ko lefta doctor la jela nakiliano
I was just arriving when they were closing their main gate. I held onto the door of the gate.
mbe futala nyame wato lefta korda bunda nyin soronda nga korda bunda nyin fana ngamuta
Gentleman told me that I couldn't see him.
fonni kenyi membe lori njako intadela
I told him I must see him.
nkae fonsa jede
If I cannot see him,
ninta jenola
I was going to petition the Vice President as head of the Security Council to
Mbe-
raise my concern.
president no lanko memala memo bankola vice president be safaro kala me tumala ben atel be marlen kanton tankada bunda mol bela be safaro kala kala mutande
When I told him that,
bringa o fae
he was overwhelmed.
ode onara na silendle
Couldn't know what to say.
amalon abe
I
mem
said, I must see my client, whether you like it.
mbalan tanko e fonsin nakiliano jede fo lafta on fal malaf ban laf mbajela
Then he said he was going to send word inside to the directors if they would give me.
jel tom
Access.
ate fondin kenyi sila konye ko mbina kumbe kuma kan furan lan nyaton ko maka jube fo abe silodi lan pour nga silodi lay dum
It was the officers inside who refused.
official wolem do kulan be kono wollel balanda
I was informed by Nafi
na fiyen kala mutande nyinna
that doctor was taken out of the NIA premises
ye doctor findinde NIA lo sansambani kono le
in the night
sutola
because of the severity of his condition.
katung ala ko al halo be lari
He
nyame
was taken to RVH for
ya
treatment.
samba bankola lopitan bado pour kata jara
So Monday,
tenewola
I made contact with the German consulate
jamal la consulate na nyomoy
because there were 2 German nationals involved.
katung jaman banku dim fula wala ba ko nyin kono
Apparently, the NIA gave those people an appointment for them to go back on Monday.
katung wato la NIA le wato di wala pour wol si sey finde jango sam tenewola
So I escorted them to the NIA.
tambite nyaado ndata ingeta min dara NIA
But when I reached,
rim futata NIA
I wanted the confrontation between my clients and the
Lafida-
NIA officers to be in my presence.
lafta kachame be sor la ninna kiliano tema ke NIA el fawol nyala
Ablai Kujabi refused.
Abdullahi Kujabi balanda
Did so with arrogance.
aya kenin telimbali ya fon kono jawya kono
Sangaro.
sangaro
I left the German nationals there and I went back to the court.
jaman banku dingo mol nyebula je ntata kidillar
Then I did my investigation.
na kisikisiroke
I interviewed them.
nyenyi ninka
They give me a detailed account of how they were treated
ye kuma ni sata nye nyala mi alon ko ye muta nyame
and how doctor was also brutalized.
andu doctor fana ya tajire ya nyame
In fact, Dr. Mahla told me
andu doctor mala nyi fonye
that the last time he saw Dr. Alamin,
wati laba me na anyabo da Dr. Alami Kang
he was being dragged on the floor
ya kurundu teroro
and he was not sure if there was life in his body.
ako andu amalla nyina fo niyo famo bala o wado
Then I decided to write a petition to the Director General.
jel do ngani miro da silam pour nga safaro ke petition o safe ngaki director general e coordinateur e
Do you know the reason for this treatment?
yalla dalilo me asabu ni maral nya ya kala
Well, the Germans, Dr. Mahla,
in jaman dingol
came
Dr.
to
Mahla
Gambia to purchase diamonds.
anara Gambia banko kan jane pour ka lulo sang diamond
He purchased 8 pieces of diamonds.
pieces say ay wala sang
And in fact, he went to Freetown.
anara nata Freetown
He didn't buy
Sarali
the diamonds here in the Gambia.
sorry
He went to Freetown
nata Freetown Saralian banko kan
and he purchased the diamonds there.
ay nyi diamond ol sanje
And he was given his certificate of origin.
andu inata na nyi kaito dia la memba to nyani la ko nyi mu diamond ol leti
He had a friend called Nicholas Westphal.
ay terima do sore ka me Nicholas Westphal
Nicola had a girlfriend.
Nicola sunguro do babulu
She was the NIA informant.
wala mu NIL la kibar dilade wala kibaro di NIL
She disclosed to the NIA that these people have money and diamonds.
wala nata na fo NIL la nyimoli ko do sore la ndum diamond o bebulu
Would you happen to know the value of those diamonds?
Well, no, wo diamond on nyanta ka hirika kodola jellem ila kumanyu.
I cannot remember now how much they purchased the diamonds for.
hakilo ta mudano le yo diamond o le yo lulu wol nya sanjel
There were 8 pieces.
pieces say them
So they also had
Can
dollars.
you just enlighten me, Mr. Ture, because I'm a bit confused. The possession of diamonds, is that a national security threat?
Foko that left the agents.
Why were the NIA involved?
Nitakasita left the yasenending. Foko diamond sandro woko to munyati ko abesilandir bunda na tela na tanko bunda fanala bang. For ajerta NIA dabulakon.
No, there was no security issue involved.
Hani tanko bunda kute jamea lon ko
They only descended on them to extort their money and their diamonds from them.
Boyte kan ne rom puruka kodo tay bulu aninke la diamond wala fananta.
Because at that time,
Kat wo watola.
the NIA enjoy a complete total blanket impunity in this country.
Kadung NIL wo jamano la nitol mu moldat men yalon ko kukela nun kese buka bunda akono kubuka boato.
So they were lodged at Senegambia Hotel.
Ebenun jiaring Senegambia Hotel oldo.
It was this girlfriend who informed the officer commanding the NIA in, I think, Badala Park area.
Nyin sunkuto nyin wole NIL la me alon ko atel be Badala Park jamma fangola jang atele o NIL nyin kalamutande.
They went and attacked them.
Itata iboyte kan
and dispossessed them
andu inata na fengol table
of their money,
ila kodo
$206,000.
Wili keme fula wili woro dollar kodo
8 pieces of diamonds.
Anim kuntu sei diamond
Personal cell phones.
Anila mobile lolu
and their briefcase.
Anila kuneo.
So the NIA was turned into a criminal gang.
Sa NIA akam to ko ekada dinkra de mi alon ko kuja barala jawli kole keji.
So I wrote a letter, a petition to the Director General.
Narana letter was have puruka Director General nyin kordatio nyin ka
demanded that he should surrender his officers to the Inspector General of Police.
Ka kani nyin nako ala dokula nyin puru ay sa ay di police wala kunten kola.
That the matter should be investigated.
Andu ngai tandi je fanan ko nyin anyana kiskisi lale.
Copied the entire establishment, that is all the permanent secretaries, all the ministers, all the foreign missions.
Andu narna doko bundal besa fe permanent secretarial ministalu.
And I blew it in the private media.
And na kumakauny janjang kibar janjan bunda lo yana ko mandra masakunda ko.
It was the Independent that published the news.
Kibar bunda me ba fala Independent wala na kibaro nyi wala na rana janjang.
It was a damning revelation against the NIA.
Mukula de kullo le me alon ko kullo wanyar le me alon ka boyta NIA kan.
Following day,
Osamo
Independent published the dismissal of all the NIA officers who were involved.
Independent kibar bunda nyi nar na safaro ke o NIA me alon ko be bulata ko nyi ngono ko yebe bayde.
But let me say this, that was the first of its kind.
Bar mbadunga nyi fo wala mu koti me alon ko nyi akunyo anyon ko keta.
The NIA have never been dismissed for any unlawful act.
NIA inana me bay baral me alon ko ye baral menke ani luanta ya barole.
Before that time.
Watola.
They've never been arrested for any unlawful act before that time.
Inana me muta baral me alon ko luanta ya barole inana me mutala.
So the government acted responsibly.
Masakunda na simfa da nyata ko ajarta nyame.
They set up a panel of investigators.
Inata na alfa kafolo ne pour que la womol la ko kiskisi.
And they were investigated.
Inata ne wol ngol kiskisi.
A report was issued.
Inata na report odi.
And they were charged and taken to court.
Inata na tumiro de kangoda yesamba kitiola.
And they were prosecuted.
Ye kitindi.
Except one. They were all convicted.
Ye be soronne.
But one was acquitted on appeal.
Modo bejere wo ye bulale o fanan sora nyame aketa murun kan kitiyol de ibafmela appeal.
What happened to the diamonds?
Wolulu wol nyingi nata kenyadi.
Still not been recovered.
Ani kabi wol manje.
Neither the money
kodolem
nor any of the personal possessions.
Waranto nyimol la sora fengol nyimme alon ko la tati bu.
The German government asserted all forms of pressure on the Gambia government.
Yaman masakunda e deto sifa bela Gambia masakunda ka.
To the European Union.
Katani European la o
Up to now,
kafubani.
the diamonds have not been.
Hani kabi beat lo men do lulu nyimmanje.
Do you have any idea, any rumors about in whose hands they possibly could be?
Foyalone abadami foye ngunu kumol moyle ko diamond.
Well, when the matter was going to the panel, one of the officers, NIA officers involved, one of the suspects, sent a friend of his to me. Said he wanted to disclose the location of the diamonds. Who had possession of the money as well. Only if he would get my cooperation. I said, if he was willing to do so, let him do so. I was willing to engage headlong that person, no matter who he is.
Be parerin ne pour ka bismillah wato koku nyaaw nyasi yo be nyaawa ning mo sifa o sifa ma be parerin.
But at the same time,
Baro wata kilingol.
they were being prevailed over by Abdullah Kujabi.
Abdullah Kujabi wala keta mod me yalon ko wala
Was promising to reinstate them.
wala la hiro di la ko abe murundi la nan do ko wala.
So they could never get that done.
Baro manna na o la hiro nyinga o mendi mo manna na ke kotanki.
Because he was also finally removed from the NIA.
Ka dung hani nyala ba nyinga defa nyinga na bondi NIA le.
Was transferred to Brikama as governor.
Natana sawundi Brikama ka ke kumanda oti ata Abdullah Kujabi.
But when I published that letter,
Bari kabringa o letter o nyinga janjang.
And they were sacked.
Ye bay.
I remember lawyer Jobate.
Kilo bakang lawyer Jobate. Baba Dinding.
Met along the corridors of the court in the High Court.
Benta peron kiti bulato jimbango raje.
He said, BORRY.
Akunye BORRY.
He said, I won my case without trial because of you.
Laftana kitio la wara manda ki ngana kitio ganye manda ki case ganye wara manda kitio kai case juma.
He said the NIA sees his clients' vehicles and other possessions, and he has made strenuous efforts
to
recover them.
Without
success.
And
he filed an action before the High Court. But the case was dragging.
But
when you publish that your dangerous letter,
they called
me and said, come and collect all your clients' properties. As a matter of fact, that time in question, NIA was full of equipments, movables, items they have unlawfully seized from people. That day they discharged everything. All those items. Yes.
Who were the particular accused persons in that case, the NIA officials?
I can only remember the names of two of them now. Salimina Drame and Kajali Jawara. There was a boy so named Baro. I can't remember the rest of them, their names.
And do you know if that particular case had any political influence whatsoever?
Okay, did
those diamonds land in the hand of anybody in the higher echelons of the government?
I did not know the person in the I did not know in whose possession they were. But as a matter of fact, when this issue arose, the officers who actually raided the Germans in their hotel room were also arrested. And I believe that time they must have recovered, the authorities, senior authorities must have recovered all these positions. But they quickly released them. And they wanted to cover up the story.
Is it possible that the diamonds are still in the hand of those NIA officers who had recovered them initially? Did they benefit from it?
I don't think that was possible. My strongest conviction is that they must have surrendered them to the authorities. When I published the letter, the then Director General Abdullah Kujabi was very annoyed about it. He saw that as the strongest challenge to the authority of the NIA. The following day, no, the very day the letter was published, I had a matter I went for in SL Magistrates Court. I was coming. I had one of the small boats.
ngani mbulata nyin kulunde kono.
Then I received a call.
Morana tan telephone na mobile or.
A young lady in the office of the NIA called me.
Musunguro me alonga do kola NIA ayankumandi.
He said, "Are you lawyer TOURAY?" I said, "Yes."
Akonye ko fa italam lawyer TOURAY ti bankai ha.
Said, "I'm calling from the office of the president, NIA headquarters."
Akonye ko mbedo kumandro ke gang president office to me alonga wala be NIA la office me be NIA president office.
Said the director general has instructed me to inform you that you are needed at the NIA headquarters.
Akonye director general ko ngi kala mutande nyinna ko iko isulati la direct NIA la kordabar.
I told her,
nkae ko
"Tell your boss you have conveyed the message."
afoy la nyaron ko kibaro nyi yafuta ndimmale.
Then I switched off my phone.
Nganna mobile ofa.
I went home straight.
Ndada su.
It was much later
Nyato domanding
that I was discussing with the then DPP Ajim.
Be nin DPP Ajim be kachakang.
Then he told me this scenario, what happened between himself and Abdullah Kujabi.
Anatana adamu tapuruka nyim misalo foji sa kumul sara nyemenketa tani Abdullah Kujabi tema.
How that happened was when these people were being prosecuted in Kanifing.
Okay, no nyari le kabri nyimmole yemuta be kitindi kan Kanifing kidid laro.
On one occasion, he complained to me. The DPP complained to me.
Lunna na soto ndanyi DPP nyi nara na wasi inteya.
He said I was not following up on the matter.
Ako mantra ko nyi no masata kang.
I said to him, but I came to court and I gave my testimony, and that's all I can do.
Nkai ko nara kitid laro andu ngana sedan dodi andu nsi odona keno.
So you were a witness in this particular case?
Yes, I was a witness in the matter. Because the Germans could not come back. Because they were afraid of their own safety. So I had to go to court to give evidence. So that was the moment he told me. He said, when you published that letter, Abdullah came to my office.
Abdullah na na officer.
He was fuming with rage.
Sorry, can you repeat?
He was very angry.
Abe kamfare mbake.
He said Abdullah asked him, "Who is this lawyer?"
Ako Abdullah nyininga akaya jubala nyi lawyer.
He said, "He's a young man. He's around."
Akaya nyimu lawyer ndingol di bara abe janne.
He said, "We must arrest him."
Ako first nyanna mutalal.
He said, "You want to arrest him?" He said, "Yes."
Akaya ko ilafta mutalal akaya ha.
He said, "In all my working relationship with you,
I
want to advise you today. And I want you to sit down and you keep quiet. And I'll close my office. I'll lock it. And I want you to listen to me very carefully." He said, "Did you read this letter?" He said, "Yes." He said, "Then you didn't understand it." He said, "I understood the letter." He said, "No." He said, "Abdullah." He said, "The gentleman who wrote this letter, yes, if you want to arrest him, you will arrest him. But that will not scare him. I can assure you that. And if you release him, he's going to destroy your life." He said, "There is another part of the story which he has not published. And that will be a direct attack on you in person." He said, when he told him that, then he realized he was feeling cold. He said, "If you arrest him, you release him. But if you release him, he will destroy your life." And that was the absolute truth. Because briefly before that diamond incident, I had investigated involving the Al-Rawi brothers. I had already investigated the matter involving the Al-Rawi brothers who were taken to Guantanamo Bay in
Al-Rawi brothers all and
all that evidence that I had was pointing at Abdullah in person. But that was it. He left the scene. He went to Brikama. That was the end of the story.
But the diamonds, they've disappeared forever.
The they disappeared forever.
plus over 200,000 US
And let
dollars.
me also add,
ngani fana lafa
Dr. Alamin sold his house in Germany,
Dr. Alami ala kordala wa fi Germany bankoka
took that money,
ayo kodota
invested it in this diamond business.
aya dundi nyin julayaro memu lulo julayati
The profit that he was going to earn from that business,
anyana lankam men sodo law business o nyin
he
kono
wanted to build a children's home in the Gambia.
alaftala dinnu wala kordalo la Gambia bankoka
That was going to be a charity.
be kala nun la fram baltinu
I just wanted to make the link that Abdullah Kujabi was the head of the NIA then.
Yes, he was the head of the
NIA.
And he reported directly to the president. And it is clear from evidence we've received in the commission that apart from that working relationship, there was also a personal relationship between
them. And commission inata kalamuta na bota doko la na team inatana ke multimillion ko damol fonga e chokinyolo sotole.
Well, we understand that he is an uncle to Jame. I don't know how true it is. And that was what forced me to give the letter a nationwide publicity. I didn't want the story to be covered. Much as I was interested in exposing it, I was equally interested in embarrassing the government.
Another cases you've been involved in was the cases of Ensa Baji, aka Jesus, who was a former IGP, as well as Usman Jame, former SG.
Dablo ta diamol min kono welem mi yalon ka kete num police la kunton kodi ka fa Esa Baji aning Usman Jamme.
Perhaps you could just treat the two together just to show what the issues were in those cases and how civil servants were prosecuted, arrested, prosecuted in the courts and dealt with by the regime.
Asa esa nku flo ka funyo mara ye diama fanala coming ika mol mi ale do ko ke kan man sai ke mutanya jere ke samba kitin drade ke kitin di nyami isa kumol for aitawo ka fanala.
Ensa Baji, former Inspector General of Police.
Ensa Baji, police la nundo ko nyaronko.
This case was one of clear witch hunt.
I'll tell you
the genesis why I was charged. He came here before the TRRC. Perhaps he did not disclose, but actually led to his arrest. I'll tell you today. As I was charged because of the Ghanaian case. And the drug that was uncovered in Bonto. When this Ghanaian incident happened, Mr. Baji was not in the country, he was in Sudan.
Mr. Baji,
it was when he came that he was elevated, he finally became Inspector General of Police. The UN sent a team of investigators.
United Nations
when they came, he was then the Inspector General of Police. There was a request that the police investigate the matter. Jesus refused. Said it was an NIA operation. The police had nothing to do with it. So let them ask the NIA to investigate the matter. They said no, they wanted a neutral body, and that's the police. To investigate the matter. He still refused. Then, as a way of meeting in the middle, he proposed that he could convey the NIA investigation report as IG to the UN.
United Nations now.
And they all agreed over that. He wrote a letter and forwarded the report. Thereafter, he told me in person that the then Director General of NI Numo Kujabi.
Nundo nyaton ko membe nun NI ka fa numo kujabi.
Told him, did you realize
Ko akaya ko ye fanyin kala mutale
the information that you gave to UN was not correct?
Ye kibaro men di dunia la ka fu bala wa hon me UN kuma kan ne me alon ko amantiling.
So he said he expressed anger over the matter.
Ko anarna la kam fa itandi ko nyindo.
And he was not happy that he was misled in sending a wrong report.
Ko amon konda nyina ko ya rafa ya filin le pour ka report samba me alon ko amanki report tilindi wati.
It was his belief, and I believe him,
Atelata wala no defana lata ala.
that it was Mr. Numo Kujabi
Ko Mr. Numo Kujabi lamu
who informed the government, the president at the time,
me president kala mudande wo wato la
that Jesus was going to leak the truth about the NI, the Ghanaian incident.
Jesus lebe kala moti me yalon ko be nyin ko nyin aba wanyar la mem kata Ghanaian on len ko
Because if you come to the substance of the charges against him,
kadu ni na jube fam keso nyin fam kumo kan nyin keso nyin tumiro men da akawda
he was accused of being part of a ring of robbery incidents in the country.
ya tumi ko adabe ka fole kono mele yalon ko wol ka boyin kan mol boyin kan ne ni jorangol la ba fu me robbery.
At the material time, those robberies were taking place.
O wato la nyin robbery nyi men nyin boyin kan ku woldi abe kerine.
It was Jesus who arrested all the people involved.
Jesus la mote me yalon ko atele nyi mol be muta men yalon ko ida be nyin kusifa ba.
He arraigned them before the court.
Ay samba kitiyo nyati lo.
And they were convicted.
Andu ye sorong.
They all escaped from custody, lawful custody, after their conviction and sentence.
Be kanata Morocco no kabri loi ye sorong.
At that material time,
Wato la.
they escaped within the jurisdiction of the KMC.
Kanata KMC welem kanafin tundora janti.
Jesus was then police commissioner in Brikama.
Jesus lem police la commissioner de Brikama tundoro.
It was the commissioner of operations who asked him to assist the police, the Gambia police force, in tracking the culprits back again.
Commissioner me marlin do ko tamandri nyala police kunda to atele kanindro kabul pour atesi police ol mako pour kanyin molu nyinke ma ke je.
He arrested all of them along the Gambian border between the Gambia and Casamas.
Nata nakata kuwa fere foi nata na nyimol be muta Gambia la nane oto Gambia ni Senegal na nane.
And they were brought back and prosecuted for escape from lawful custody. And they were sentenced again.
Ye murundi na ye muta ye itumiro le kan wala nyindi ibe ko ibe Morocco na kanata luanta ya kan inata ne soron kotanke.
Could anybody imagine
Fa kilo si nyimuta no bang
that
ko
the officer who has arrested you
mola me alon ko ay muta
has taken you to court?
ay samba kitiyo nyati
You have been convicted and sentenced.
lo ay muta ay sorong
And again, you have escaped.
jedo fana ye kanata
He has arrested you again.
ay muta kotanke
He has taken you to court and you have been convicted.
ay samba kitiyo dulato kiti bundado kitiyo ay
If it
sorong
was true that Jesus was part of that ring of conspiracy
ning ayata to nyare no ko Jesus mo molti me alon ko adabe o kafo mol kono
of the robberies,
men alon ko boyin kan nalle
what was
ni
most
jora
natural was for them to have accused him.
oto dali mune dali basa ba tumiro la
They did not.
bari mo okay
So they brought him to court,
ya nati kitiyo nyati lola
and false witnesses to give false testimony against him.
sede folo men nata ki sedandiro di me alon ko manke sedandi tilindingo de me alon ko ay wala la kan
Some of them, they promised them that they were even going to release them
doli be je fay la hido di la koy be bulala le
if they would agree to give false testimony against him.
ni sonta pour ka sedandiro me alon ko be kala sedandiro de me alon ko ata kala sedandi
And
tilindo
on the strength of that, he was convicted.
andu dalilo kan de minata na sorong
And that was information you received from your client at the time.
The wonyina kibaro ti yemi soto ela kliano bulu wo wato.
Yes, but quite apart from the information, his narration, I mean, you look at the setting, the possibilities. Is it reasonably possible that you can arrest me? We can be part of a conspiracy, and I'm getting the largest booty out of that. You arrest me now, take me before a court, get me convicted and sentenced. For some of them, they were serving a period of 10 years.
ana mange ko nyin lana ko me ate mem fanye bari misal fe ron kun hakilo fo hakilo si nyimuta no ite keta modi ya mo muta ya tumi ite ata yo mo muta na ya nati ya samba kitiyo nyati lon kitiyo ya kitindi kitiyo ya soron ay kana Morocco no mansala Morocco no ay kana ina ta nata yo mari muta na ya nati ko take ite hani kabi wo mankanya ko sa ite ni wo molle wo mo kilingol ite wo me alon ko si nyafula ibita be muta la ibe nati la iko inarna tumiro ko ite ni wo molle be fule kiling al kapu ke me alon ko luwanta yala memu boyin kande
At no time,
and hani wati teje
there was no allegation raised by any one of those accused persons that he was part of the ring of robbery which was ongoing in the country.
Mote je me alon ko ay kuma kan fo ka fo ko adabe kafukule kono me alon ko ni robbery memo mun boyen kan koti ani wolbe kafukilin.
Who gave the evidence that you are alleging was false in court?
Jumala
against
nata sedando
Ensa
di kapoko
There was this chap called Ramses.
Sorry?
There was this chap called Ramses.
Ni modo be jega me Ramses.
He came here and gave a testimony.
Nara commission ro janne ala sedando di.
And there was one gentleman, Abrahman.
Ninke kilin fana be je ba fo me
I think it's
Abdurrahman.
Abrahman Jallo. He was from Basse, but he's late now.
Abdurrahman Jallo ngamira boda basere bara bantale sai.
Many of the witnesses even had to apologize to him in mile too.
Sede jamal be je me alon ko fon ye narana ya ye sedando di akang narana abolo sede kasibumba wato
So, but at the time,
wo wato
you go before the criminal court.
kata nyin kiti
Because of the proceedings,
ko nyin la nyabe
text
nyame.
message will enter a judge's number.
Ka kiti tela jele kibaro be futala la
And then you say
mobile ko.
court rise.
Aba fala alinga alwuli
Almost
ka.
every sitting, the NIA would be there.
Wato jama pe je kiti bunda
Signals will be given to the judge.
ena el kata jela ando be ena
And he will rise and you go to chambers and they'll meet him there.
kiti tela nyi iba nyakatila.
Who was the judge that handled that case?
Jumala kiti tela di mata wo kiti ya.
Ikpala handled one of the matters and Justice Amadi handled the other.
Pala kilingo muda Justice Hamadi kilingo ta.
And those events that you just mentioned happened in both of their cases, in their courts?
Andu ite nyi membe fo jang nyi beketa nyi lela kiti watol.
Not the issue of text messages coming through judge's phone in those two matters, but it happened in other sister cases.
Not in
Ensa's case,
kiti
but it
fulo me
happened in
alon
other
ko
sister
kiti
cases.
tela nyi katra kiti ola message ol nyi kibaro kana ila mobile ol bara kita kiti odol konale.
So your conclusion is that it is your belief that those charges were bogus?
Of
The
course,
electoral government
they were
vote
hoax
to-
charges.
Ah.
But nonetheless, the court convicted them.
Bahane
Yes,
wo
of course.
kiti yo na
Convicted him.
table like.
What about, are you finished?
Yes, I believe so far. on
We
that.
are running out of time, actually.
Before you leave the Ensa Baji Jesus matter,
Yes.
is it your assertion, Mr. Toure, that he could not have been party to the massive cover-up that followed them on the crime of killing the West African migrants?
Well, he was not in the country.
Atamandra num bango kan jende wo watola.
And from the story that I gathered from him,
Ndinga kibaro men kafu akabata
he never wanted the police to investigate the matter.
anana malla fi pour police ya ko nyinta ka ko kiskisi.
All right. But I think what he did was to forward a copy of the NIA report to the UN.
Bare nde jikere ko ay menge wala nyindi ko ka ena ella report o nyin kawta ka copy nyinta ka ki dunia bela banku ba e kay kafu banyi.
At least that he told me.
Well,
I
is
would
that
have-
transmittal that perhaps would have linked him to the cover-up?
Sorry?
Say the cover-up could have been the transmittal of the report to the UN.
Yes.
But you are indicating that, or you're asserting that no, he could not have been part of that cover-up.
The version that I got from Jesus was
Ndinga kuma
this.
ko men so do Jesus blue wala nyindi.
That's us at the time when the report was being sent.
Wato men nyi report o nyi yaki
He did not know how those people met their death.
o mol nyin amalong woliye la saya nyin inata na ifanje nyadi da usaya kono.
All right. It was after the events that Numo informed him
O nyin kerin kola lam numona ta na kalamutan.
that, in fact,
O
he died
ifatale.
out of wrongdoing.
Fata ni nyala me alon ko
But
silanta
the question of cover-up, I wouldn't be able to
Bari
express
ite
any
kan men
opinion
ka
on that
ko fo
because
maboro nyin fa adaba kono da malon di soto.
Fine. Thank you. Council, continue.
Bala.
Thank you very much, Mr. Chairman. Just lastly, the issue of Usman Jame.
Puru laban o Usman Jamela ko.
Okay. Usman was charged with the offense of economic crime.
Usman ya tumiro men denga kangoda wala nyinde go fankotinya ayo barata wala.
And was arraigned before the magistrate in Banjul Magistrates Court.
Ya samba kiti mundandingo to memo banjulu magistrates court.
The court does not have jurisdiction to hear matters
O tumiri sifal kiti bundandingo man sembo so puruka kiti
pertaining to economic crime.
men kamuta fankotinya.
Nonetheless, he was convicted,
Bare onya inara na sorong.
even when the court does not have jurisdiction.
Anin ka handa ranya ko kiti bundandingo man sembo so luwa la karola man sembo di la puruka fankotinya tumiri bundal nyin kauta kala muy.
And do you believe that both of these cases, the Ensa Baji case as well as the Usman Jammeh case? Do you believe they were both politically motivated? And what is your reason?
Say for isa kono ko ensa bajila diamoning aning Usman Jama be mu fenati mi am political ba konole and ite mun dalil sort of natara yewole fo.
I've already told you the background to the Ensa Baji case.
Nganyim fo ne ko man don ko ensa bajila ko nyin alhalo lata nyame.
The case involving the former Secretary General
Usman Jammeh wala ko nyin ala case nyin lata nyame.
the dimension that I have raised is the lack of jurisdiction in the court.
Ngaku la nyame fo ja wala nyindi ko court ni ya kiti bunda mento o kiti bunda man sembo soro pour ka o tumiri fusifal nyin ka mo
Even
kiti
if the charge against Usman was true,
hanninga tara tumirol me yemella Usman kan ninto hannara
it should have been arranged before the High Court.
inyanna sambala kiti bunda me wala kiti bunda batoti.
But the only reason why they arranged it before the Magistrate Court
Bar dalilo me asabu ya samba kiti bunda ndingoto.
was because the government was certainly confident that they were going to get a conviction against.
Dalilo me beje wala nyito manza kunda me be nunja ibe lari nyinala ko hannara ba ya samba kiti bunda ndingoto ibe lari nyinala ko ibe ganyela lela hamoto pour ka soro.
Notwithstanding the court's lack of jurisdiction.
Hannara nyaonya kiti oro ko luwa lande nyame kiti bunda ndingoto man sembo soro ka o tumir sifal nyin ka lamoy.
And what was the government's interest in his case? Why was he charged and brought before the court?
Masakunda ya munsulale soto fo ya tumi ya nate kiti bundato.
You know, I may not be able to go into the details of that, but there was a lot of infighting within the public service.
Asikeno ko nyin te dinkano la kono bari mbe mem kuma kilim fole wala nyindi ko nyo bayndo sia bata no masakunda do kula damal teman o war.
What was his position?
Muna tela makamoti.
Sorry?
He was Secretary General.
Secretary General.
Amunun Secretary General.
The civil service.
And he was working directly on the Jammeh.
Ndabe do ko ke ko no jamela koto.
So definitely something like that would not have happened if Jammeh did not actually consent to it.
Of course, I mean, you cannot get the Secretary General dismissed, arrested and charged and convicted without President giving directives.
Hom to nyalti Secretary General ite osoto no la kaw muta ka sindidula gini ka tumiro de nga ngoda hanin ka bi amanda o ka samba kidi dularo ya ko president de mam fen kala mutaje tumala mera be do ko la president wala ko
as well as the previous IGP as well, that would be the same case.
Ani fana police la kunton ko nunto o fana la ko keta no wala nyam.
What happened later was that these directives were in writing.
Nyin ko nyin yamaro nyin ka ke saferol le.
The office of the president will write directly to the IGP, arrest this man, investigate and prosecute.
President wala office ka safaro ke police wala kunton ko la office wala ka fako ani mo kare alamuta aliya kitindi oranda le tumiro de nga kan wada sifa la ka kata
because I remember in the case involving Dr. Njoguba,
hakilo ba kan case me alon ko Dr. Njoguba ba ko
Lamin AMS Jobate,
in Lamin AMS Jobate,
and no, I believe in the case of
a
copy of that directive came to the court.
It
was the case involving Jobate,
and you were privy to that?
Yes.
But in the cases of your own clients, that did not happen.
But it found clear no la fanala wo manga kuti minketa.
No, they did not produce any executive directive. If they existed at all.
Ani maya maribna de ka foko safari yamaro le member president office or sifa le mona de la cliano lam ko.
But you believe that this happened, it was orally done because it could not have, these prosecutions could not have happened without the knowledge and the consent of the head of state.
Committee to it is someone la kito la na ta no
president Inspector General of Police remand him mile 2 without the president giving orders to him.
Ronyati police la kunton ko eto woto murano la katumiro de kan oda ya samba kase bungo waya tara banko la nyaton ko même president da makaro president wala nyaton ko de men ka tambon roke.
Thank you very much, Mr.
Barabaka Mr. TOURAY.
We have come to the end of your testimony. And I will now hand you over to Mr. Chairman and the commissioners for any questions they may ask.
Very detailed and informative testimony. Thank you so much, Mr. TOURAY. We've taken a full day of your time, but to come and assist us in our fulfillment of our mandate. But thank you very much indeed for a very good testimony.
Abaraka bake kanjul abaraka bake sedo being tatilo be mume nata si jampruke la sediandro di sediandro ni alon ka kita kumati mi alon ka kumata baka ndar asa asa hayata fana.
Commissioners, if you have any questions, please indicate. Imam C, you have the floor, please.
Imam Sila lafta ke nyininka.
Mr. TOURAY jërëjëf.
Mr. Toure, thank you.
Ci sa wax bi rafet na trop.
Your testimony, for your testimony here, it is very clear.
Waaw ñu lay gërëm ci li nga wax ni wax bi nga xamantene wax nga ko boole ko ak sa dëgër fit.
We are thanking you, the testimonies that you have gathered here, and you have stated your testimonies with confidence.
Waaw liggéey bi nga liggéey depuis bi nga nekkee depuis buñ duggee TRRC ñu ngi dëgg sa tur.
Since we ever started this TRRC, we have been hearing your name.
Ben niñ la gisee tey.
Until up to today when we see you.
Waaye dëgg sa liggéey bi rafet na trop.
But truly, you have did a very good job.
Jaar nga fu xat waaye terewul ni nga buggee sa réew.
You have encountered difficulties, but still that does not prevent you to show how much love you have for your country.
Génnuloo dawuloo ndax bugga sa réew.
You didn't run away because you love your country.
Parce que amoon nga chance nga tànn fu la nekk nga dem fa.
Because you were having the opportunity to travel to anywhere you wanted to live.
Da nga doon am foofu liggéey.
You will have secured a job there.
Waaye ni nga buggee sa réew mi.
Because of the love you have for your country.
Moo tax nga toog.
That's the reason why you didn't go away.
Man li ma lay laaj rek mooy ndax mos nga am bis bi nga xamante ne keroog moom tiit nga trop.
The only question I have for you is whether there was a particular day that day you were very scared and threatened.
Okay, thank you so much, Imam C.
Imam C.
I don't know how to how to answer this question. Quite frankly, there were people who came to my father on a number of occasions to warn him that I should be careful. To the extent that he wouldn't allow me to be outside by Maghrib time. 7, I must be inside the compound. I was also privy to some confidential information that my name was listed down. But I was not traumatized by that. I knew one thing, Jammeh was going to leave this country. And leave me here. I have faith in the Almighty. I know no matter how difficult the challenges were, Jammeh was going to leave me here. Yes. If I was threatened, I would have left the Gambia.
Thank God then.
God.
Thank you very much. Deputy Chair, you have the floor, please.
Thank you, Chair. Thank you, Sagar. Thank you, BORRY. Let me add my voice to that of Imam by congratulating you and also to thank you for your courageous stance and against tyranny. Now, having said this, I have got 2 brief questions. I don't know whether the answer will be brief. Did you hear me?
Yes.
Okay, the first one is, how did the overt disregard of judicial values and processes by the judiciary
sila akeno ranyare judiciary memu kiti bundal nyinti ila bunya hormoni bunya aning alonko tamani mafa jiko men sorka be kan
impact on the public trust and confidence in the legal system of the country?
Narna kolea dal sabu jamae jiko ni mafa men soro ye.
And on strengthening impunity.
Aning kanana moe kuge me alonko ay luatinya ay mari tuo nyama kumala bo kan ka ko nyi julo saba.
Okay, thank you so much. I must say you have summarized it all.
Baraka bake mbafula ko yekumoni ya fole ya sutiandile yafo.
If you work in the judiciary at that time,
Yaje wo watu na terebe doko la kiti bundato wo watu kono.
there was a time
Wati sototano.
when, in fact, when people have problems, they don't want to engage Gambian lawyers.
Wati sotota founding ni mole kole ya kuol soto ibuka pare fampuruka Gambia loyal dabulaje.
There were few who would want to engage Nigerian lawyers.
Dental bijele mili alonko ibele flet in Nigeria la lawyer
Because
mol mi
the
bijele
belief is that
katu ilata mina no wala
if you
nyintiko
engage a Nigerian lawyer,
ni Nigerian lawyer dabule
he'll be
la
able to
kokon.
talk to his brother Nigerian judge.
Aba fero kalale pra diama
Adonyo
e mi alonko mu Nigeria no jojo la mati.
That even if you have to be convicted,
Ana tarafa lua ya blole kan.
there can be some sympathy for you.
Esike balafa dabe tarejel.
The Jammeh completely overrun the system.
Game cool kenina cool landa tambi tamandileno.
Judiciary was firmly in his grip.
Yaje kiti bundani watatala marola koto.
But there were a few exceptions. It was all not bad.
Bari yalong dulal bije mi yalong ko cool danta volta manka bele joyata.
I remember one young man, Lamin Bai.
Hakilo bakang funding ke do ka fa Lamin Bai.
He was a magistrate in Banjul Magistrate.
Watu kitindi lalem Banjul Magistrate Court.
You are assured that if you are arraigned before him, he will grant you bail.
Akakoy male ka lala ko ni samba nyati lungo dorong abeso la bella.
And there were sister Gambian judges also.
Anum fonanga mbaring musol dol sotol mi yalong ko kiti kuntula le mweti.
They would come between the state and the citizens.
And ibe kamo leti mi yalong katara mansaning banku dingo leti.
But the system was that bad. It reached a point when, in fact, the accused persons were detained along with witnesses.
Pare kuol fo nata na sangara fo labon. Mol mi yalong ko ye tumi anin sedol mi nyanta na sedi andro dile ke be muta.
I don't know if you understand what I'm saying.
The
witness will be arrested and detained
and
will not be released until when he gives his testimony. So that was how bad the system was. And he not only asserted pressure on the judiciary, but in the criminal division also. He had a fund that was being disbursed by the Ministry of Justice. This issue was raised before this very commission, but it was not properly investigated. There was not full and complete disclosure, because every payment that was made was documented. And I will tell you, in the handing over notes of one attorney general after the order, most of these payments were highlighted. So that was how bad it was. And most of our colleagues, the lawyers, were fatigued. They were exhausted. Some wanted to pack up and wanted to leave the jurisdiction if Jammeh was to win in 2016. It was God's time that we had a change. Yes.
The second question is in relation to how the military turned courthouses into military zones to instill fear into the judges so that they could influence the judgments.
isaje o kiti teylal nying ila kiti teylo nying nyanna kaka nyame isaje si maslangota ya dundol sondomol kono nyanna kuntula nyame ata kuntula o nyama.
You had the personal experience.
Ita fan kunnon keta molde me ya lonko ya lon ya ko nyin takile.
But not everyone is Borry Touré.
Bare mobe manke Borry Touré tide.
And not everyone is Justice Monaghan.
Bare mobe fana manke Justice Monaghan.
So how did this really affect the judges in giving out their judgment?
Sila nying akake keno nyaade le nara nying kuolbe la renteng kiti tela nying ni ara kuolbe la renteng ikang ila kiti kundunya nying akela kiti kundunya nying akabatan no nyaadi le.
Okay, thank you. I think
Baraka.
in the recent past,
Ngamira ko nying kuol men tambetano.
they resorted to bringing the paramilitary to escort accused persons to court.
Tana fang fue kanyim paralta puri mol danda mila ko tumir mol la muti.
I think the idea of soldiers escorting suspects in court wasn't a very common phenomenon.
Na jike ko wala ngamira ko komi kanyin soja rol miyalan ko kana ikamol danda nang kiti bunda te fenne miyalan ka mang danda kakanu.
It's only when soldiers are involved in treason
Akake wato mina
that
wale
sometimes you see soldiers.
akake wato mina wale natara soja rol dabula ta ku kono mil joko jamfa jawolten wato le kaji soja rol kam tumir mol danda.
But there was an incident
Bare kudo na ketani.
in 2006
2006 kono.
when Justice Yeboah was handling the treason trial.
Wato mi an Justice Yeboah abe sawndiri kan nung nying jamfa jaw kiti yolan.
One of the soldiers misfired his gun.
Soja do bije fan kido fightable.
And as at the time when it happened, the judge was very close by.
Kabrabe ke kan natara wokiti tela ni besuti yaren.
He had to run into our chambers.
Ananta borra kabori katala office ko.
So many things happened.
So ku jama lekata.
But the picture was all not bad too.
Bari ya je kol beta ranu nyama.
There was interference, but
ke da dundela nu obe kere na.
yes, there were people who actually balanced the show.
Bari dol bi jele mi yalan ko ye kol kele pride.
Yes, among the judges and the magistrates.
Yalan ko welle kiti tela.
And I must also say
dumil be duma. Dun sa fo no fana ko.
that
Ko.
most of this trouble actually would happen in the criminal division.
Kole akol be ni ajiba ka ke damin to ba ke wala ku jo baralali ke la kol jibe da.
The High Court is divided into various divisions.
Ya jele kiti bunda ya farales.
So if you are not in the criminal division,
Sa bajala ko ni man tara ku jo ba ke lali ke samada.
you have a peace of mind.
E ka hakil tem kuma soto.
Yes.
Thank you very much.
Barabake council.
Thank you. Imam C, don't shower Mr. TOURAY with lots of praises about bravery.
Imam si agada mo di mialan ka e jay bagala coming ikata jambaro mindik.
No, I said he shouldn't shower
amanyana ko itandi ko ite mo kera
with lots
jawaro
of praises because that bravery doesn't originate from him. The TOURAYs have the syringe, there's the CCM and the Morris. They are the ones who make them brave. So don't give him any praises about being brave. Commissioner Carr, you have the floor, please.
Commissioner Carr, wala lafta sero nyini kala kotanke.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Ka inimbarabake chairman.
Thank you, Mr. TOURAY, for your wonderful work.
Inimbarabake Mr. TOURAY memusero ila doku kendo ka.
Defending the human rights of your fellow citizens.
Kalo banku di nyolu ka lo kela nyantota ka kele.
It's indeed commendable.
Kulemme yalonko tenturo ni njairo be yewata.
I want to ask you two questions.
Lafte nyininkar fulalla.
The first is in relation to the reasons that you have given before this commission.
For
why you believed Mr. Esa Baji was witch hunted.
Mr. Esa Baji ala ko nyin keta kulde me alan ko nyo bayndo la dunda kono.
You've told us that it was in relation to two issues, that is the issue of the Ghanaians and the issue of the drugs.
Anu ya fanya jang kufula wala bala ko nyin kono tumiro mela daga folo wala nyindi ko Ghanaian la ko nyin anin flanja wala mo sira ma fen wala ko wati.
And you've told us why he was persecuted in relation to the Ghanaians.
Anu ya fanya le ko dalilo me asabu ya kidindi da Ghanaian la ko.
I didn't hear you narrate the other issue, which is the issue of the drugs.
Ma moy yekuma fo kuta jammialon ko wala ko fulanja wati yemella kan wala mo sira ma fen wala ko wati.
Can you help us with that?
Thank you.
Isinde ma no yoto kono fanu.
It was an oversight, and it was a very interesting observation. You know, it was the international intelligence institutions that alerted the Gambia government.
That
a large quantity of drugs was stored in Bonto, and it was being peddled. The perception of the president was that it was Jesus who leaked that intelligence to those institutions. And that was the very reason why they turned the story around to implicate him, the very person, in that allegation. Because this was an isolated spot. And if you know Jesus, I would tell you a remark made by Sidney Riley, of blessed memory. He was former Inspector General of Police. I remember one day he picked me in his car. We were both going to Kanifi Magistrates Court. My vehicle had a breakdown. That was when Jesus' case was ongoing. He told me, he said, I wish you well in this matter. He said, your client was a very effective field officer. Even as a junior officer from the training school. He said, you give him any file, no matter how complicated, he will bring you results within 24 hours. But Jammeh himself said it. He said, it's now that I have got the best Inspector General of Police. Referring to Jesus. So he thought there couldn't have been any other person who could have leaked that vital intelligence information without Mr. Baji.
So your belief is that Jammeh knew about the drugs? He didn't want anybody to disclose it or to leak it.
Well, see, I did not participate in that trial. But my brother was one of the lawyers in the case. And that is LS Camara. We cannot disclose it all as lawyers. Client's confidence. But if you would go through the cross-examination records, when I was cross-examining Silaba Samate, the issue about the origin of those drugs and who was behind it was clearly captured. He denied, but I put it to him. Yes. Let me tell you this. Is it reasonably possible that such an operation can take place in a country
ay ke banko ka mi yalan ko
without any solid arrangement with the government of the day,
ay hatara hani de amumanke yanyo moy masakunda ni wo mol tema
all of the people involved are foreigners,
mol mi yalan ko be da bi je wol manke jam banko dingolti
not one Gambian among them.
ani Gambia ding kilinte kon
You ship 2 tons of cocaine inside the country,
yena ton fula dundin na nyim banko kanjam
and then you get on and about trading it.
and inata fam foya dati fam ka business ka wa
We are all not sleeping in this country.
dol be man tara sino la nyim banko kan
There must have been some high degree of complicity.
ku bi jele mi yalan ko mo bi jele mi yalan ko wol daba ko nyum kono
And you would be surprised
anda be kele terima ko
that notwithstanding amendments to the law on drugs,
ana tara fa hani bi e falindiro ga loi la militata
imposing, in fact, death penalty,
ka foko fam komini ya mutebulu rek loi fenkata
the
nyande
Venezuelans were subsequently pardoned and they were all released from prison.
dunia jibe wo mol mi wo Venezuela dingol inata ne killing bulale
They only served a very short period.
itata kasoto kono fo watin dindoro
At least if the state was completely innocent about it,
na tara masakunda nyi ma hani fellong yung ko nyunto
they shouldn't have given them this thing. They shouldn't have given them pardon
imanya na kayam fo keno
for the largest shipment of drugs in the nation.
kata fo sakat ma drogo mi ami muta banko ka wala gina warta drogo be
In our entire history.
na tariko be mumeto
And not only drugs,
na manke drogo damani
they also had AK-47 machine guns with them.
bari AK-47 masima afengo kidol be nyongela
And that was the latest version of the AK-47.
and wolmo kuta AK-47 kuta kutollet
At least, if you say this, I wouldn't mind much about drugs, but at least
drogo la fanala bag
the gun peddling aspect of it,
bari komen kidol min da ketaje
in my opinion,
ndefe na miroto
should have been such a weightier consideration on the part of the government not to have granted them any form of pardon.
wo fonyanta kele fenneti man sakunda fanna minyanta atina
So my conclusion is that
sambe na kumul labana
those who came here
mol mi ay nata jam
came here on an arranged platform
wol nata le komi ye
that they will enjoy impunity
komi binale ye kul ke
and trade what they traded,
andu ye wa furu
and nothing was going to come out.
be wala kan andu hani fenta bolaje
But for the international alert,
bari komi sandi
they would not have been arrested.
ite mutalano.
Thank you. My final question.
Nyinin kar labon
We've all commended you for your excellent work.
dol be tendu nge jayila do ko kendola
And I know Imam has asked you a very funny question.
wala no imami nyinin kar le me alon ko nyinin karo nyin mane afenketa bulungela jele maku nyinin karo lende
But you've worked in an environment which was very difficult,
bari te do ko ke dandan na me alon ko dandan nyin ko leada bakele nu
as your colleagues did.
ko do nyo ko tagon yaake nyamen.
So my question is, what kept you going, and what was your most inspirational moment in your career at that time?
Ndenge nyinin karo me de sa mune narane hamendi hani sa mune narane tendende pour que la do ko ke la loya yala karola ke tendendi e be do ko ke kan hanka bi ba kan nyamen.
Well, it was only God. Quite frankly.
Tonya alalem.
Yes, and I must say I was given to a lot of prayer also.
Dunga dua jamal lesoto. Yes.
On my own accord, sometimes it even affects my work, my coursework. Yes, when I close from office, I have no business with my books. So that's the other part of my life.
Thank you once again.
Yes, thank you.
Thank you very much indeed. Mr. TOURAY, if you have any concluding remarks to make, you may please proceed to do so now.
Mr. TOURAY silang commissioner mo man soro membe lafte ke nyininka silang kiamane dunyo silo dila ninga dre kuma soro be lafle ke la kuma da soro men isitenteng.
I thank God that I have sailed through this.
And
let me emphasize that I owe my very life to the Almighty. He was the creator who protected me and guided me throughout. What we have gone through as a nation was highly traumatizing. Most of what comes to us as lawyers is what is visible. The physical abuse on our clients, the infraction of their rights, and so on. But I remember I was talking to Dr. Sise of Kololi Clinic. I referred a client to him who was a subject of abuse. For him to examine his body and do a medical report. He told me, I have seen the gentleman he referred to me. It's about the two sister professions, law and medicine. He said, I think we know more than the lawyers in terms of the trauma which is meted out on victims. He said there are certain aspects of their experience that they would not disclose to their lawyers. He said, I give you a case in point. He said, an elderly gentleman from within the community of Brikama, highly responsible person, who has a very large family. He has got children and grandchildren. He said he was brutalized by the junta all over his body. But that was one small part of it. He said the detailed part of the agony was that he was castrated. He said when the man told him this, he then asked him, why don't you go to the press and publicize this? He said the man turned around and told him, he said, I don't want to embarrass my family. My wives, my children and grandchildren. So he said, I must keep quiet over this till my grave. For me, it's, and I believe for all of us, it's a learning experience. I used to have a great deal of confidence in the average Gambian. I thought everybody was a dependable character. I remember when I was a student in Furabe, then the NPC government, the APC government had failed completely the nation. APC on a daily occurrence, things would happen to the disappointment of the average citizen. And I used to stand in the midst of my Sierra Leonean colleagues and I would tell them, this is not possible in the Gambia. I used to swear on the Quran that this cannot happen in the Gambia. Because I had faith in the country. But I was mistaken. What Jammeh did, he did it in conspiracy with Gambians. And like Vatikiotis said, he's a historian who wrote the history of Egypt in a book entitled Modern Egypt.
Atele motimiala atele Egypt la tariko nyi safe ka fo mi modern Egypt kuto.
He said no society is written on a tabula rasa.
Ako society tije mi alan ko ya safe tabla.
No society is written on a clean slate.
Among mo tije mi alan ko society tije mi alan ko ya safe keto la bala doron.
I thank God for one development in the sub-region. I believe in smaller nations like the Gambia, we may not go through the experience of coups anymore. Because if it happens, the bigger nations will not, in West Africa, will not allow it. But for that, what I have seen Gambians tolerate, anytime there is a coup in this country, we can be enslaved in our own country. As far as the army is concerned, I was very hopeful that there was going to be security sector reforms. But I'm disappointed. I was hopeful that the commissions of inquiries that actually were established I was hopeful that the government was going to implement the recommendations of those commissions of inquiry. But I'm equally disappointed. And I'm afraid that the Truth and Reconciliation Commission report may be faced with the same degree of lethargy that at the end of the day it will only become stories in our bantabas. I think we are faced with the problem of leadership. I'm not doing politics, but this is our country. I'm calling on the government without any partisan feeling. People who took liberty, who took liberty into their hands and brutalized innocent Gambians. I'm appealing to the government that they must not allow an air of impunity over that. Because I believe every Gambian has the urge to revenge. But the only reason why people are not doing so is because they have faith that the government will enforce the law. So I'm calling on all Gambians. I'm calling on the government that at least if all other commission reports are going to be ignored, the report of the TRRC should be looked into. I had the unfortunate experience of listening to a lady when I was a magistrate in Farafenye. She was a relative of Sadauda. Only because of that, she was arrested. Brought to mile 2. Was tortured naked. Electrocuted. in her private part.
Ala
Cold
nya-
water
ala musu
poured
yalta.
over her.
Ye jismal bonga kan.
Anytime she sits to reflect over it, she will cry.
Watu wati na ye mira wo kula durasa kumbo.
And she was in, she had age on her side.
Atu watu ata telefona abakeba kan.
Are we going to allow all these people to go to their graves
Pombe sonna nyimol be yetela kabro
without any form of justice taking place
ayatara manto nyata mandila karola
as a government and a people?
komin tolmo masakunda tani mol
I hope,
njikita njikita
and this is my very big hope,
andu nyimuna jiki ba fongalti
that the government
komin nyimman sakunda
will give
aber dir kelale
due attention to the report of the Truth and Reconciliation
ka
Commission.
hakilo tu pake nyin TRRC la kibaro mi alan ko ba bonde la nyato
Because without it,
kato ne wo mantaraji
how are we going to guarantee justice
ntol ba fola no nyaade le tonya nin tilingo abe lolale
to people who have been traumatized?
sakatuma mol mi alan ko ye ni tora ko lekan.
Some people are not even enjoying the common feeling that they are Gambians.
Dol fongo be kering famille alon ko fangi mantara ka kalamuto bolo baraka kontan go ko tol mo Gambia
Because they feel that they have been betrayed and disappointed by their own government.
katu ilatala ko ilam fongo la man sekunda wole jamfa bote kota.
I'm referring to the APRC government.
Mbe mum foka wole wo sojer man sekunda mi benu jawata mo mi alan ko
People you are expected to protect.
Mol mi alan ko jigita ko tele nyanta ke tankarangoti.
If they are the ones who have now become your victims,
sa na tara wole na ta ka moti mi alan ko ketela tora molti.
Are we going to allow that climate of impunity to prevail?
Fomba sonna la komi wo ko nyingwe ko neka ke ye mol tora hanife man na boje.
I hope
njigita
we will all, as Gambians, take the position that that is not going to prevail in this country. Really. People have seen their parents abuse in all forms. And the only reason why they have not taken to the path of revenge is because there is a hope that a day of reckoning will come. And people will be called to account. In my personal opinion, even when those who have been brutalized have forgiven, I don't think there should be blanket impunity. And I believe that's all I have to say. There have been many Gambians like myself who stood their grounds, who are not alive here today. So for me, it's not on account of my own strength. It's only by the will and the power of the Almighty. I thank my parents, and then I thank TRRC. I was unable to come here much earlier, mainly because of my schedule in the courts. But may I take this opportunity to thank the entire staff of the Truth and Reconciliation Commission. It's a service which the nation appreciates very much. Because for us lawyers, we've been privy to most of this information. But if you tell a lot of people in the streets, they can't believe it. So, but the perpetrators themselves, some of them have now opened up and they have explained what they did. Although many also came here and they lied. And the nation is aware that in fact they have lied. So, Honorable Chairman, I can only commend you and members of your commission.
nse min ke no doron ke la doku nyima itandile be min ke ka ni doku nyol
And
commissioner
the entire staff here,
and mol min be mi ala be doku la ja
we are praying and hoping that,
be dua kan anu be jikirin ko
that the Almighty will continue to guide you
Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala bal mako la
for you to be able to successfully accomplish this task.
isa ja ko salla nyin doku nyin timmandino
I thank you all,
mbafla albe al baraka
and God bless you all.
alama ala ne malalma
Thank you.
baraka
Lots of wisdom in those concluding remarks, Mr. TOURAY.
ilo yo kuma kanyima balla fo ila nyum kuma ko mi ala ila banta wala fo la ten
Thank you very much indeed
baraka bake
for all your efforts in the coming to testify.
yo ko min
for the
beke pour
commission.
ka je doro yena ila cede andro di nyin commission o nyati ngala
Yes, the objectives of the commission
tonya commission o nyingi nyanta ka minke
as defined in the Constituent Act
komi ya fo nyamin loi mi alon ko wala be marade nyin commission o tamanyala
does mention healing and reconciliation.
komi min bije wala nyinte ko ko min beke tan sa yamfo den nga kafu nyoma ko ten
But it also has as a principal objective
bare fana kudo fana bije mi alon ko yembula wala min gena kumata
addressing impunity.
wala ku jawol min be kata ku mambo je so wo ko je ngaje ko nga ku tamandi jele
We as a commission
dol mi yalan kon tolen commission o tijang
will do our best
men kata ko be kala
to make recommendations
ka sutendirol bondi
that would help bring about reconciliation
mi yalan
and
ko
reconciliation,
aba makoro kala pour ngana kafu nyoma koten
healing,
kambe kafundi nyoma min kata be bang
but very importantly,
bari fana min gena
to
ko
address
mata
impunity.
wala ko mol mi yari ku jawol ke ya ke nyami nga fem foje nga je ko akana ga koten
And make recommendations for meaningful reforms.
ando fana kana sutendirol bondi mi yalan ko wala nyande ka falingol la fanato
We do hope that
jigita
the
ko
country as a whole
banko be mume
would fight and struggle to implement those recommendations.
kato be kala ka je kon tolewo sutendirol min fintina kibarol e ba jela ko wolbe tamata ko nyanta tamala en kon tolya fo nyami
Again, we thank you enormously for your efforts.
ko tenke mba fule ya baraka yekata ko minke kana jang
And this would bring us to the end of our proceedings for today.
bi nyina mun labandulati bi ngat kachal minke bi abadanna janne
And it is the end of the 22nd session of the commission.
nyina mun kacha monim flo nyinti mi yalan ko bile wobe banna
We won't have any public hearings next week.
sai we ko min kanana manta diamu kala jam
We'll work in the committees. The work of the commission would continue in the committees.
commission la do ko be continue la na committee to
And we will resume our public hearings on Monday, the 19th of April.
mbina murana jang epe karoti tanning kononto
We thank you very much, for your attention. And,
la baraka
we will call it a day and a week for the public hearings. Meetings adjourned. Thank you all.
Thank you so much.
Yeah.